Welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Westborough Planning Board. We have a lengthy agenda tonight. I will ask everyone speaking to please speak into the microphone for the benefit of people here and those at home watching. I'll read the agenda. This is a reminder, too, that this meeting is being recorded. We have a continuation of the public hearing for 180, 182 Turnpike Road site plan application. We have a continuation of public hearing for earth moving permit 25 Gleason. Continuation of the public hearing for site plan application at 190, 212 Oak Street. An update on Village Commons 1 Gleason Street. A discussion on the Master Plan Implementation Committee and a discussion of future town meeting articles. We're going to begin with the 180, 182 Turnpike Road site plan application. I'm going to ask Jim for just a summary of where we're at, and then we'll have the applicant up to address the board, and it is a public hearing, so we'll turn to the public for questions and comments. Any speakers need to state your name and address for the record. Jim, do you have a summary for us before we start?
Mr. Chairman, did you mention that the meeting was being recorded?
I
think you did. Okay, thank you. Yes, at our last meeting, as you know, we had asked the applicant to address several concerns of the abutters and to have a meeting with the abutters. That meeting occurred this afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Walker Meadow Clubhouse. There was a presentation made by Attorney Marshall Gould and their site engineer, Waterman Design. Randy Waterman made the presentation. We talked about the site itself, how it was oriented, the open space of the parcel itself. We talked about the lighting on the site. We talked about the access points to the site, the western and eastern driveway. The applicant has proposed to limit the western driveway to entrance only, so there would be no exiting of any vehicles. That would help with trucks trying to accelerate to get up to speed. We spoke about the location of the dumpsters, which has been moved by the applicant to the Carmack side of the site. We talked about the fueling station, which is proposed to remain in place and to be encased by a concrete enclosure, which is typical for above-ground filling service stations. And this is one tank. I want to make that clear. We talked about the, let's see, I have my own notes.
Jim, did you talk about the B-Wall trail?
Only briefly.
Only briefly.
I know that the board wants to discuss that. We talked about the parking deck and the upper deck. The applicant has offered a 42-inch solid wall so that any headlights of any vehicles on the deck would be shielded from any turns that they make towards the residential abutters. We talked about the height of light installations being reduced to 15.5 feet in total, with full cutoff fixtures with a rear shield to protect the residential abutters from any light spill. I think that summarizes what we talked about. And as you know, at our last meeting, their traffic consultant, Ron Mueller, made a presentation. Ron is here this evening to answer any questions that you might have. I know that the board will want to talk about the photometric study, the lighting, and any other site plans. So I think that's a pretty good summary.
So we have a letter from the applicant addressing many of these concerns. The board has received that, but I'm going to ask Marshall to, again, maybe a little redundant with what you talked about at the meeting today, but if you could address the board and summarize what changes you've made to the plan.
Thank you very much. Be happy to. I don't think this will take long, but I am going to ask a question. At the last couple of meetings, we've discussed traffic issues and the need for a peer review based on the westerly drive being both entrance in, exit out for the employee and business vehicles for deliveries, etc. We have agreed to make that change. We did ask Ron to come to tonight's meeting. The only issue is whether the board would consider not having a peer review on traffic We asked him to come for that reason with that change. I know that he had sent a memo to the town saying he hopes that that would eliminate the need for peer review. I don't know if the board would consider taking that first. Ron has another meeting he's supposed to get to, so we promised we'd try to get him in and out.
All right, so why don't we address that briefly, because I'd like to hear from the public before we make any changes on that.
Okay?
At least give the public a chance to address that if they have comments.
Okay?
So I realize that he doesn't have to be here, but maybe, he can't be here for the entirety of this meeting, but maybe you could address that change, why you feel a peer review is unnecessary, and give the board some background there, as well as the public.
Sure.
Ron?
If I may, yeah. So as I recall from the last meeting, and Mr. Norris, you made the comment that you weren't comfortable with the westerly driveway allowing right turns out because of the sightline issue, and for that reason, I believe, requested the peer review. Now that we're proposing to change that and allow only entering traffic, so only right turns into the site, and all exiting traffic, including car carriers, employee traffic, would have to come out at the easterly driveway, where we have more than enough sight distance to allow safe movements there. So that being the case now, I question whether a peer review is still necessary if that was the only issue for which a peer review was requested.
So I don't necessarily want to...
Could I comment on that?
Yeah, 1 second, Hazel. I don't necessarily want to have a vote on this now, but if you have questions for Ron, I think we should vote on that after we've given the public a chance to address it.
I would like to say that was not my only issue. I also had issues with the sightlines coming over the hill, plus things like snow removal. I mean, there are a number of questions I had. It was not just that specific question that it was entry and exit on that particular entrance to the property. I felt there were a number of other things that need to be looked at, which is the reason I felt strongly that we needed a peer review, and I have not changed my mind in any way, even with your comments.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just question if the two issues are the sight lines that are coming over the hill, which are now alleviated by eliminating exiting traffic at the westerly driveway. I'm not sure what snow removal has to do with it. I mean, that's more of an internal site issue, isn't it?
No, I mean, I think as far as traffic coming over there, my concern as much as anything else, and I've driven that any number of times, is coming over the top of that hill and trucks slowing to turn into that driveway, I think is going to be a major traffic hazard. And I have not changed my view on that. And the other thing that I've been thinking about as I looked at this was the fact Route 9 is snowplowed by the state. And consequently, they're going to be pushing snow right over into what you consider as your, quote, kind of right-hand lane into the property. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to be dealt with. It's just something to think about. But I do feel strongly that we still need a peer review on this.
Okay, I mean, I think I made the case at the last meeting that the westerly driveway, even if we were to allow right turns out of that driveway, that it does meet the requirements for adequate sightline.
Well, all right, that may be, but as I said, just because
those are the only
the minimum requirements doesn't mean that it's appropriate for that particular piece of property. That's all I'm saying, is that, you know, fine, you can meet requirements, but at the same time, you have to look at topography, you have to look at the traffic on the road, and I think local people driving that road. So, as I said, it's always nice to say, okay, fine, we meet the requirements, but maybe in certain situations, those requirements are not enough, and that's why I look for a peer review.
I understand your point. When we talk about sightlines, we talk about vehicles pulling out onto the major street, and whether or not there is adequate sightlines for an approaching car coming over the hill to be able to safely stop to avoid that collision. We've proven that that location has adequate sightlines, but have gone a step beyond that and now have said that we will agreed to restrict exiting traffic there. Traffic that's slowing down, coming down the hill to make that right turn in, has no bearing on available sightlines. And I think, you know, if you do choose to hire a peer review consultant, they're going to come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. Now, as I said, I was concerned about the traffic coming over the hill, the car carriers slowing down in order to turn into that driveway. So, as I said, I think that's still a major hazard. So, particularly with the speed that traffic travels on Route 9 at that particular stop. But I don't think we need to argue about this any further, but I would very much like to have a peer review on this due to those kinds of problems that I foresee.
Any other comments from the board? All right, so I've thought about this, and I've been out there. You know, my feeling is that vehicles coming up that hill, particularly, you know, the bigger trucks, I'm pretty sure almost everybody driving fast is going to be in the left lane trying to get past those bigger trucks. And I think they're going to be visible. I also think that driveway is pretty wide. And there's a deceleration lane, which, you know, I was given an instruction that the breakdown lane can be used for deceleration as well. I'm not sure what issues there would be. I mean, I feel like a peer review is going to be a little redundant. I don't necessarily feel like spending this applicant's money on a peer review that's going to come back and with the same findings. So, I mean, that's my feeling on it. You know, I'd like to hear from the public on it. I'd like to hear Jim's comments on it, because he's got a lot more experience than I do. So, all right, those are my thoughts. Do you have anything to say, Jim? Anything to add?
So I think limiting the driveway, the western driveway, to entrance only will definitely solve the issue for stopping distance, which is probably more important than line of sight. I do see vehicles use the breakdown lane to decelerate. I use it myself as I approach the intersection at Lyman Street. I don't think it's going to address the other issues, internal circulation or things like that, but if the issue is safety on Route 9 for turning vehicles, I think the applicant's done a good job at addressing that.
Okay, and would a peer review address the internal circulation of the site, or is that something?
If you ask for it, they will, sure.
Okay. So what issues are you concerned about with the internal circulation?
Well, the truck turning template for safety vehicles, fire truck particularly, is going to have some work. I know that the fire chief pointed out that he was concerned that the truck turning would work interior, so that's one thing. I think Ron can probably, and the engineer, Waterman, can probably make those adjustments, but that's one issue that was flagged or brought up. There may be other issues that a traffic consultant would want to look at.
Okay.
We've already talked to the fire department and met with the chief, and I think we've addressed all his concerns on paper. They haven't gone back to him yet, as they will with the whole peer review letter, which we hope to have back to you in the next 2 days. So.
Yeah, could you, Randy, could you just repeat that? We didn't hear most of that.
We have met with the fire department and talked to them about their specific comments, and we are putting those in our full letter of review that's going to go back to the peer review consultant. And so we hope to file that letter back here with the planning board and with Ty and Bond in the next 2 days, and that would have any revised site plans associated with it, and it would have the revisions that the fire department's looking for. So there was nothing major in their comments, so it was slight tweaks. The one on the right-hand side is the proposed. So traffic circulation within the site it couldn't be any more straightforward. It comes down the driveway, goes across the back and out to the east. It's just one big U-turn.
We got rid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and with this change on the entrance, the throat, there was a center divide island in that driveway that's been taken off. And so there would just be a card reader there so the vehicles would still stop, because this is going to be limited to car carriers coming in and employees and service vehicles. So they would still have a car carrier there, card carrier or card reader. So that's been removed. So it's actually a really good solution, I think, and makes circulation much improved.
Yeah, looking at that, I mean, there's room enough for a car to stop and still have, you know, you could almost have two cars stopped side by side there at the entrance and still have
It's
not
30
block
feet
the
wide,
travel
yeah.
lane. So
Yeah.
plus the entrance itself is how wide?
30.
30 feet wide. So it just seems to me like a truck could be able to take a wide turn in there. There's no island to go over. All right, I want to think about it, and like I said, I want to hear from the public on it, but let's defer a decision on that for later in the meeting. Marshall, go ahead.
If I may just address one, I'm sorry. If I may address one point on that. I was speaking with the attorney who represents 182 Turnpike, and I had asked the question of how many employees are actually in that building on a routine basis. I have been told that the number of employees at that building are approximately 75 employees in the businesses at 182 Turnpike, where the driveway is in approximately that area. Not only that, but they have the Borough's Islamic Society that has space in that building, and they have prayer services 3 times a day, 7 times a week, and on average, they have 30 to 50 people attend that each day, and on their high holy days, there are in excess of 100 people on the site. On those days, that is more car trips in than would be for the automotive dealership, where they intend to have 75 employees and approximately 75 service trips, 75 to 80 service trips. Those are going to be, the service trips are going to be coming in a completely different driveway, more eastbound. So for the numbers that I've given you at 182, that does not include the car trips at 180 Turnpike Road that has been occupied for many years, although during the COVID time has been empty. And I am not aware of any accidents there. I've not been informed of any, having spoken to Peter McCarthy, who owns the 180, and there does not appear to be any safety issue. And I understand that the car carriers are going to be much bigger vehicles coming in than an employee's car. But nevertheless, they're coming over that same rise, coming down the hill, and they're going into the driveway that is in approximately the location that we are talking about. And I don't believe it's been a safety issue. So, and to sort of second what Ron said, I agree that we said we were going to talk about the snow removal last time, and that has been addressed. And the snow removal isn't going to be up at Route 9. There's not going to be piling of snow at Route 9 or at the Route 9 entranceway. And that's going to help visibility also by clearing it off of there. So I'm hoping that the board will agree with our traffic engineer that this meets all of the safety issues. I certainly respect your opinion on this, Hazel. I'm just telling you, based on the inquiries we've made of the employees at the buildings, how many car trips go in and out a day, it seems like there are as many car trips going into and out of 182 Turnpike, just the one office building, without even counting 180 Turnpike Road. and that has not been a problem. So I hope the board will
So
consider that.
this westerly entrance will still be authorized vehicles only?
Yes,
Okay, so it'll only be the car carriers and employees?
that's correct. Or if there is a service delivery of some parts, I think service delivery of parts would also be coming in that area, or once a week, a fuel delivery, that would come in on that driveway. But all customer cars, which is the majority of the traffic, are going to be coming in on the easterly driveway, and 100% of the vehicles now, after the changes we've made, will be exiting on the east, where CarMax has been using that as their entrance and exit for these years.
So will that redesigned driveway have kind of an angled entry so that people are discouraged from exiting that way? And there's a
We're going to
gate?
have signage on the way out, so it'll say, do not enter, no exit on Route 9. So we're going to cover it that way.
Is it still gated?
Yeah, I think that is still gated. Yeah.
Yes,
So it's
there will
still
be a
gated.
gate.
There'll
There
still
will
be
be
gated.
able to
Yeah,
go out.
and you just have a card reader to get in.
All right. All right, let's defer a decision on that until we get in here. Did you have a question?
Quick question. I don't know if we've talked about it. I don't remember what I was talking about. What about test drives?
Test drives, everybody will come and go out on that easterly side.
And what's the route that people are going to take? Because they're going to have to loop around, right? So they're going to have to come back down eastbound 9 to get back into the site, because they're not going to do test drives within the site. So what are you going to do to prevent them from coming in that western driveway?
It's going to be gated.
Right, but they might not know that. They're test driving.
Oh, so, well, there's going to be signage as you're coming into the site that says, for car carriers and employees only, coming in, and then there's a gate and the card reader.
Right.
So if anybody's going on a test drive, they're certainly going to be told before they leave the dealership. And where they go, I couldn't say obviously exactly, but assuming they want to go out up Route 9 a little bit, turn around and come back, they would come down and come in that same easterly entrance.
Right.
So they go in and out.
Sorry for interrupting. If I could, I just confirmed, I thought this was true, I needed to check. Any customers that go out for a test drive will have the salesperson with them.
Okay.
So they will know the route that they are required to take.
Okay. That's Hyundai policy to have the salesperson with them?
I have Ashley Pegram and we have Nate Burnt. You might want to come up and sit in the first row, both from Automotive Management in Florida. Ashley is their on-site project rep, and Nick has been the person who is in charge of all facilities there, and he's the, I'll call it the decision maker, and they've both just confirmed that. And if you want to make it a decision condition, that's their policy, we're okay with that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's defer a decision on the peer review until we've gotten through all the other issues and heard from the public, okay? I realize that Ron may not be here for that, but
Not going to have any other.
I do want to give the public a chance to speak on
Are
that.
there any other questions of Ron before he leaves? From
This-
anybody?
At this point, I don't have anything.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
Okay.
Appreciate your coming here.
Will the public have any questions for Ron?
Okay, well, why don't we open it up to the public just for questions for the traffic consultant? I don't want to get into other issues until we've had a chance to hear from the applicant, but if you have a question about the traffic entering or leaving the site or a point you want to make, please raise your hand and remember to state your name and address. Ma'am?
My name is Andrea Burdick, and I live at 11 Essex Way in Walker Meadow. I feel that it's already unsafe, and I'll tell you why. When we come down Park Street during commute hours, because I'm retired, I know that it makes a big difference whether it's the middle of the day on a weekday or if it's a weekend or commute hours. Commute hours are the worst, and weekends are pretty bad too. So we're living in Walker Meadow. If we want to get onto Route 9, we're coming down Park Street and we're going to turn right. We're already waiting a long, long time for an opening in traffic for us to be able to turn onto Route 9. Okay, now since CarMax came, and I realize that's a different project, but since they came, the car carriers pulling over on Route 9, whether CarMax intended them to do that or not, creates not just that one car carrier, but a backlog. So that now, in addition to the traffic that was already not that great before, we're having to pull in to Route 9, where the cars behind us are going super fast, and in front of us, we don't have very much space to pull in because they're backed up from the other commute traffic, or further down, they're backed up from the light. There's a lot of traffic going into the Stop and Shop parking lot. And I was concerned about this issue before CarMax even came along, and now we have CarMax, and I've actually seen it worsen. And they're located closer to where we are. In other words, they're the very first thing on Route 9 from where we're turning. And I'm trying to imagine the fact that we're trying to turn right onto the highway, and they're coming with another car carrier or even their employees, or even whatever, delivery of cars. I don't know what would be involved, but all I know is it's already hazardous for us to get onto Route 9 from where we live. And, you know, we take our time and wait until it's safe, but it's getting harder and harder to get an opening during multiple hours of the week on weekends and during commute hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? I saw Mr. Webster. Did you have a comment, question? Left side. Yes. No, yeah, you can come out. I'm just telling her 1 second. I did recognize. Just traffic, yeah.
Wayne Webster, 3 Essex Way. I have a variety of comments this evening, but I'll limit this to just traffic. I know Attorney Gould has asked for, no peer review of traffic after the presentation that they made. And looking at this particular drawing, which we saw today, we got Thursday night, and we saw it today, again during our meeting at 2 o'clock, there's still an issue coming down that hill. And I would say there is a need for a peer review of traffic. Entrances and exits are interesting. We can look at numbers of employees and talk about when they leave and when they come, but that isn't the impact that happens on that hill. When you come over that hill, people are going 55 miles an hour, and I've done this now a dozen times in the last 3 days. It's 1001, 1002, and there's the driveway. 2 seconds. You have 2 seconds. On the 9th of September, one of the homeowners at Walker Meadow was driving by, and in your package that I gave you today, and let me give it to Mr. Gould, that I've asked you to enter into evidence. There's a photograph right here of a truck that couldn't get into that driveway, and how the traffic started to go around it and the mess that it was making. It's a minor, you look at these photographs, they're not professional photographers, but here they are. This is going to happen more often than not. Trucks are going to come here, they're going to stop, they're going to start to pull in. If somebody's halfway in, if there's going to be a gate there, we've questioned who's operating the gate. If it's a delivery man from Napa or something like that, does he have a card for the gate? How does he get in?
Park there.
And certainly, I don't know how your GPS works, but mine works, and I come over to a strange area, and it says, you're here. And there's the sign for the dealership. I'm going to pull in. So there's a lot going on that has to do with hazards in that area on Route 9. And that hill is about a 20 to 25-foot drop as you come over. It's perfectly blind. And if you don't know that that driveway's there, you're just going to zip right by it. People pull over. They start to back up. My experience after driving for lots of years is that people don't do logical things on the road. If they pass it on Route 9, and all you need to do is get down to the mobile station, but they come out of the mobile station just a few feet down, and they say, I want to go to Lyman Street. I want to go north. And the light turns green, and they cross 4 lanes of traffic to get to the left turn. I don't know why they do it. But when you look here, Trucks will be coming in on odd hours all the time, and that's what we would expect from a vibrant business. And those trucks are going to back up in that driveway. Car could be in, get pulled in incorrectly, has to now go out. That truck's going to back up. But look at that picture. People immediately start moving around the truck. And the truck eventually had to pull up on Route 9 and unload there because he couldn't make it into the driveway. I don't know why. I don't know why. Later about 2 days later, I was coming over that road, and there was a car carrier coming out the easterly driveway that we see that everyone's going to use to enter and leave. And that car carrier from CarMax blocked that driveway because it struck me as I came over the hill that he couldn't come out and take a right. He had to come out into the first lane, of which there are only two, and go all the way out into the lane and start to come around. So for several seconds, maybe more, he had that entire lane blocked, and that entrance was blocked. And there we have an entrance for both dealerships. So this isn't as simple as you might think. The other part of that is we did contact Mass DOT. That's also in the document. And they've expressed an interest in looking at it at the point at which the town approves the application, and that certainly makes sense. They're concerned about safety as well. And if I understand this letter, and I won't assume that I do, the dealership would have to make an application to the state as well because of safety issues. So that's where we are on traffic. We consider it a hazard at this time. We do not think that things are wide enough to allow enough free flow of traffic. This is going to be a very busy dealership. You can just look at parking spaces and all of that. I know that we say there'll only be so many cars in and out that are customers, but when you think about the numbers of service visits every day, there's going to be a lot going on in terms of deliveries. You go in any car dealership, and there are trucks in and out all day long. That's part of a vibrant business, and we would certainly hope it would be so. Thank you.
All right, I saw another hand in the back. Ma'am, if you could just... Okay. I just need your name and address, okay?
My name is Mary Ann Peterson from 3 Dover Way. I have a very trivial question, but I think it might just change your perception of things. We're not dealing, you keep saying trucks. We're not dealing with little tinker toys that little boys used to play with. We're talking about tractor, trailer, trucks dragging 2 and 3 tiers worth of cars. This is not an ordinary truck that's going to be passing our property. It's a big vehicle that you can't see around. And so I want you to don't play with the little cars, play with the big ones. This is something very different that
Okay.
should be considered.
All right, thank you. Any other comments just on traffic for now? I'd like to get through all the open issues, and then we'll have another chance to hear from the public. All right, Ron, thank you for coming in. Marshall, I think there's several other changes you made to the plan. If you could address those so the board can hear those changes, and then we can ask some questions.
The way first of all, I want to thank Wayne and the people from Walker Meadow for having us today.
Don't forget your coat. Thank you.
I want to thank the villagers of Walker Meadow for having us today, and thank Jim Robbins for showing up today. Randy put plans up that we can now show on this board so that everybody can see them, and we have microphones so everybody should be able to hear. And I think if Randy would just repeat the presentation he gave to Walker Meadow, I believe it hits all the points that we talked about today. As a quick summary, so you'll know what to expect, we have responded in the letter. I assume the members have seen that. We dealt with lighting. We did talk briefly about snow removal and storage, and Randy will address that. We talked about the fuel, hazardous material, and trash storage, where that's going to be. Randy talked about Conservation Commission. He talked about the car wash, and he talked about the parking decks, and he talked about the landscaping. The last item was the traffic. So with the board's approval, have Randy just do the presentation, just as he did it for Walker Meadow today.
Okay, Randy, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So essentially, there have been quite a few changes to the site plan since we met last time. This one we brought as a new exhibit that we did not show to the abutters this afternoon because there were a number of questions about how do you get to 60% open space. And they couldn't see the entire length of the property that is behind the site, so we thought we would just add this one exhibit so they could see. But as we mentioned at that meeting, there's a total of about just over 9 acres, and 60% of that land will be left as open space, and 40% would be covered by the buildings and parking. The next one. This is the plan that we developed so that we could show the cross sections that we developed from the site to the back. But if we stay on the right hand over on right in this area, so from that corner of the building, the proposed building, down to this first corner of the condominiums, that's 195 feet, because there were some people that asked what some of the setbacks and dimensions were. And then here's the fuel storage location from that distance to that condominium. That's just about 130 feet. And then one of the big moves that we talked to the applicants about was that the issue with the noise with the traffic and or the noise from the trash pickup, and that was at this location. It's been moved up here near Route 9, and so that from that condominium number 12. Up to the trash dumpster, the new location is 375 feet. And we asked the applicant about the possibility of relocating the fuel storage, but because as it moves closer to Route 9 and you get all that daily vehicles passing by, there's too much of a security issue with people seeing it and wanting to try and get in there later and mess with that secure facility. So the fuel storage was left in its location. It's in a double-walled tank. There are concrete walls around the tank. There are alarms to the building. And again, all of those drawings and plans have been submitted to the fire department, and they will do a full review of that. And that has to meet all of their code issues, just like any other tank that is located on or contains fuel in town. So the main thing we wanted to show was that trash dumpster was moved quite a distance towards Route 9. We've already talked a little bit about the entry driveway there on the right, up at that location. So that now will be one-way in only for car carriers, employees, and service vehicles. And that way we don't have to worry about vehicles trying to get out around that corner. And that has allowed us to eliminate that little island that was in the center of that 30-foot wide driveway. So there would still be a card reader that the vehicles coming in would stop at, but it would be one-way only in, and it will be for employees, car carriers, and service vehicles only. And then at the back of the building right there, that is the car wash. And so the car wash as originally submitted and designed was vehicles would come out of service in this location, they could come around and they would enter the car wash over here on the east side, and they would come through the car wash, and then they'd turn and they'd come out, and they would either turn back this way or towards the front. But either way, as they come out, their lights there's a possibility the lights could shine towards the condominiums. So the applicant went back and looked at that component, and two things. One of them, as you go through the car wash, the blowers, which are the loudest component, are right here at the exit. So that is near the condominiums, and so were the cars as they're turning out. So they've reversed the layout of that car wash completely. So vehicles now will come down behind the building and enter and turn into the car wash at this location. The blowers would now be at the far end, not pointed at all towards the condominiums. They're actually pointed completely in the east towards CarMax. So I believe that moving the trash structure away from them, which is now a 375-foot setback from the nearest condominium, and then reversing the car wash were two pretty significant steps as trying to address concerns relating to noise in the area. If we go to the next. So this really, the sections lines were shown on the previous plan, but we created really, there's sort of four different options here, but this top line is in existing conditions in the summer conditions. So you can see trees have leaves, and we've got the location of the existing buildings. The second profile here is the same one. It's existing conditions, but it's in the winter because we knew that everybody would want to see what things look more realistically in the winter versus in the summer. You can see the location. The brick building is 180 closest to CarMax, and then 182 is the taller one, the two-story that's a little further up the hill. So you can see that certainly this time of year, screening the existing building isn't that difficult. There's a lot of low brush in here. In the winter, obviously, there's more views to the existing building, certainly the second building. And then we jump down, the bottom two views are the proposed conditions. So this is a proposed summer condition. So again, it's not very difficult to see that this would be pretty well screened. You've got over 100-foot wide strip of dense woods right here. There's quite a bit of growth underneath. You know, assuming some of that's going to be gone, we kind of left that a little more open on the picture. But you can see these are the proposed evergreens that we've talked about planting. Those would go in at a full 18-foot height. And so those would limit this understory opening to the buildings. But more importantly is when we go to the winter condition, again, there's about a 100-foot strip of existing dense trees in here, but in the winter, obviously, there's not much for leaves in there. Most of this is deciduous and not evergreen. So really the big view from these units would be across under the understory here towards the building. And this is the proposed location of the Norway spruce that we have on the plan. They're very dense forest trees. Those again are going to be planted at a height of 18 feet when they go in. And you can see that those will create a huge buffer to the lower stories of the building. And then you've got this dense area here of all the wooded area. So from any of the windows in these units, you'd be looking up to the top. And again, there's no windows on the back of the building. And so any view trying to look up here with these lights now all being directed straight at Route 9. So they're going to have down shields on them, and they're pointing directly at Route 9. So it would be difficult for somebody, even in the winter months, to be able to see certainly any of the vehicles up here. You might be able to see the top of this one pole. The rest of those you will not be able to see from that location. So again, if we go to the next. Oh, this one, we did this one just to show you, I think at one of the meetings somebody was asking if there were windows in the two existing buildings and what are people looking at right now. So we did this just as a quick look-see, but the building on the top, this is 182. That's the two-story office building, and you see quite a few windows in there. There'd be lights on there in the evening before they close for the night. But so there's quite a bit, and it's a second story. And then if you look at the lower building, that's 180. So there's dumpsters in the back. There are 3 loading docks. So there's quite a bit of going on between lighting and noise with the existing buildings. And these two buildings total, the facade of those that you see, that's about 300 feet of linear building that you're looking at today and have been looking at. And under the new proposal, the building in the back, that width that you see is generally about 165 feet versus this 300 feet. So there's a pretty big difference between the existing and the smaller width of the new building, and the fact, if we go to the next, let's see, next. So this is what they would be looking at from the condominium. So this is the south elevation. So if you were standing at the condominium, you would be looking at this view. And under the original proposal, up on the top deck of the building, up in this area, there were cable rails, steel cable rails that were there that would, prevent people from getting near the edge and going over by any condition. So those rails have now been removed from the plan, and those have been replaced with concrete walls that would be 42 inches off the deck where cars are parked. And since most typical vehicles would have about a 24-inch height to the center of the light on the headlights, and those walls, and we're talking this upper wall right here, would be 42 inches high, then there would be no way for lights from any of the vehicles to be shining out past that wall. In addition, then obviously this shows the location of the lights. They've gone back to the lighting people, the experts in the field, to look at, I think it was brought up, could you put wall packs around the walls? And maybe, with wall packs, you could drop the lights. But if we go to the perspective views for a minute, probably two down. There you go, up on that right. Yeah, that one right there on the upper right. So again, this view is what you're looking at from the condominiums. This is the south end of the building. Now we've already turned the car wash, so you enter here and exit out there. They've taken all the lights off of this wall completely. They filled in this wall as a solid wall, so it's not cable rail. They filled in this whole wall here as well, so it's not a cable rail. So from down in the bottom where the condominiums would be looking, the views have been screened significantly by these walls. And then they've dropped the lights, so they're not 20 feet any longer. They're at 15 and a half feet. And you can see the heads on these lights are shown here. Those lights are directed straight at Route 9. So they're pointed completely away from the abutters down here to the south. And so everything is at a low level. They did look at using wall packs, but you would need so many more of them to get the same amount of light that you need for a car dealership, so they really didn't work. And the wall packs, there would be no lighting on the interior whatsoever, so it'd be an unsafe condition. So really, this was the solution that the lighting experts came up with. It's really a small amount of light. We'll show you a little bit more detail on the lights themselves. But we think by moving them away from the edge, putting up the solid wall on this side, reducing the height of these, and reducing the total amount of light that is the output, and directing the heads directly at Route 9, I think all of those will go a long way towards mitigating any potential impacts.
Randy, can I just ask you one question? People are coming off the roof down, and then they're turning around the back of the building to go out. So you will see headlights coming down from out the ramp there as people come around to leave the property. Is that correct?
Yes, if they are leaving. There could be vehicles that are coming down to go for a test drive or something, or service or whatever, or over here on the end of the building is the photo booth, right there, that little bump out there. So people could be coming down and they're taking car in to have photographs made. So there's a lot of different things happening on this side. So they may, not every car will come down and just do a U-turn and leave, but yes, if they're coming down and leave the site, they would do
But
that.
that upper deck is where the employees park?
Some of the employees will park up on the upper deck, yes.
Well, there are two decks there, right? There are two parking decks. So it's not just the upper one, there are two parking decks there.
That's
people
correct.
Coming out.
Yep.
Continue.
The what?
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Addressing the point that Hazel just made, when cars come down the ramp and do the U-turn.
Marshall, could you use the microphone?
I'm sorry. Randy,
Yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah,
getting
yeah,
at.
yeah. So if we go back up to the top, Jerry, to one of the, that one's fine. So if you point, see, so the ramp is right there, so as vehicles are up top and they come around and they come down here and then they come down the ramp in this direction, these green symbols on here, those are those large 18-foot tall evergreens that we're planting at the back of the site. So these specifically were put here because the nearest condominium is right on that line of sight. And on our section views, those are the trees that you see on the section view. So if cars do come out and do a U-turn, they'd be coming down here and swinging around. But you can see right there, you've got these dense evergreen trees. So that should, between the fact that not every car would be going out immediately, and the fact that we've got those dense evergreens there, should screen them quite well. And then even beyond that, then you've got the trees that are on the bike,
Existing right away.
on the old trolley line.
Trolley line.
Yeah.
I had another question. If you talked about some of them coming down the ramp, then they're going to go to something that's up on the left-hand side of the building, then they'll have to turn around and come out that way because there's no way to get around that way. So you're going to have traffic also coming from the spaces on that side, plus what you talked about, some sort of, I don't know what, utility thing that was up on the right-hand side. See, all the traffic essentially that is coming from all the spaces there and parking things are going to come down and go around the building to go out the other side.
Correct.
So
Correct.
all headlights, if there are any headlights, if it's late in the day, you're going to have headlights coming all the way down and around. Is
Yeah,
that
but I think
correct?
those would be screened by the same
Well, I'm just, yeah,
Norway.
Yeah, I think again, only vehicles that are in the ramp doing a U-turn would be shining directly to the south. All these other vehicles are going to come down the driveways, and then they're going parallel to the trolley line, and they'd go out the site. So they should have no impact
So
on it.
Hazel, I'd like to have them get through everything.
Sorry,
If you could just make a note of your questions, and then we'll have each of us, address our questions individually. Everyone will get a turn, but I don't want to keep interrupting the presentation.
Sorry, I just didn't understand
I don't
the
think that's
flow.
fair to them, and maybe we could just let them finish all of that summary first,
Actually,
okay?
elevation view, we had
Go
the
ahead.
south one there, and then, okay, that's fine. So again, we've talked about how we got to these lights, and we think that they're an appropriate use in this location based on the professionals that do this. If we continue to pan down then to the next couple of sheets, keep going. So this one is the information that we got on the actual lights, so you could start to understand a little bit better on what the fixture is. You can see if we pan down just a little more so we can see that, yeah, so on these two bottom views, these are kind of interesting because it's taken obviously in an office space, and the light itself, the head, is just laying on the ground without any pole, so it's upside down and pointed the opposite direction. But you can see that it barely even lights the corner of this small office space. And you can see here where the cutoff is, this light is directed straight down. So again, if you turn the light like over here, this is what it would look like. The pole would be over here, and these lights would be facing this way into Route 9, and you've got this cutoff right here, so light can't come back, and that's what that's showing there, is that that light is deflected so it goes straight. So this light would be coming straight down to the ground, just like this, with the head pointed this way, and Route 9 would be out this direction. So again, condominiums would be over here to the south, and the poles here, and all those fixtures are directed straight towards Route 9. So I think that gives you a good idea on the sort of the strength of those lights. They're not that bright. They're lower. They're designed to be a little lighter and less intensity. So let's go, keep going. This is, it's not the easiest to read, but this again is the back of the building here. So there are 4 light poles at this location, so you can see that's where the higher amount of light would be from those. But the key thing is that the edge of the parking lot is where the foot candles from those lights stop. And the same thing in the back here, and the same thing on the west side. So that the condominiums being down on this side, I think one of their questions in their first letter was, how much light is cast across the lot line? Well, the lot line is this darker line here, and then you have the 100 feet of woods, and then this is where the light stops. So the foot candles don't go off the parking here, or off the back of the site, or off the side over here. There is a little light cast towards Route 9 just because of the slope down towards the site here, and a little bit over on the Carmack side just because we're so close to the lot line. But this is really just to show you kind of a spread of the lights. The color of these, it's a little more intense than obviously you're going to see in reality. These are going to be, again, 20-foot lights on a total 20-foot height out here, and what's typical that we would see on Route 9 or less. Go to the next then, Jer. Again, this is in the package. We printed it just so it would be in there, so you would have record of it. But this is very, very hard to read at this size. But this is showing that the light intensity you have up on the top is at a reasonable, normal level. And by the time you get down here to the back of the parking lot, it's down to 0 foot candles going off the site here, in the back here, and over on this side near the westerly lot line. So I think they've accomplished what they were trying to do, is keep the lighting to the minimum they need to have a safe condition for a car dealership. I think that was that the last.
Can you just keep that slide? If you look, going what would be east and west, you see the trolley line area outlined in red. And you can see that no light is spilling even into the trolley line area.
There you go.
It's all within the parking lot itself. And then there are wetlands between the parking lot and the trolley line, and then there is the trolley line.
Yeah, so I think in summary, we just want to say that we did listen to the neighbors. We've moved the trash dumpster setup because they were able to. They weren't able to move the fuel storage. I think reversing the car wash will go a big way towards noise, because as you leave, again, now the blowers are on the far east side of the site next to the CarMax facility. They've reduced the intensity of the light, and I think they have a package that will make sense. And with the height of it, I don't think it's going to be an issue with those new solid walls behind the building and over in the west corner. So I believe they've done a lot to try and mitigate both noise and light, which were, I think, the two biggest questions.
Okay. Let's turn to the board for questions. Anyone? Hazel, did you have anything else that you wanted?
I just wondered, how long, are the lights going to be on all night?
No. Well, actually, some lights will be on all night, but not the level that they will be at while they have business hours. Every other light will be turned off 1 hour after closing.
All right, but there will be lights on 24 hours a day?
Yes, there's a need for the security factor, but it's going to be at 50% of what the lighting is, and obviously no directional change, so it will still be contained solely within the area of the decks or the parking or just the exterior of the building. But it's going to be half of the lighting that you will see during business hours, and then inside the building, is it the same, or some of the? It'll be even less.
It'd be less, yeah.
In the service area that's fully inside, there probably will be no lights. The showroom will be dimmed to security levels, not even 50% lighting.
All right, so all the parking lots will still have 50%?
Yes, and with the amount of inventory that will be stored on the site, there's an enormous amount of inventory, and to have it go dark is a serious problem.
No, I understand that, but I just wanted a clarification.
Yes.
So people realize that lights will be on 24 hours a day there.
Correct.
So I think that's an important fact that people need
Yes.
to be aware of as far as that goes. And just clarify one other thing for me. There are 2 levels of parking in that building, that is correct?
Yes.
For a total of how many spaces for both levels together?
It's around 404.
No, just the 2 levels.
Oh, the 2 decks, 198 spaces?
On the 2, together on the 2?
Together. Yes.
So on the 3rd floor, when business, an hour after business closes, will those lights be off, the top floor?
Every other light will be turned off. So alternate lights will be off, one light as you go down. Lights that are even numbered in the pattern will go off, and those that are even numbered will remain on. That will be what's considered security levels. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, with the concrete knee walls instead of the rails on the sidewalls of the 2nd and the 3rd deck, we've been talking about the lighting on the 3rd deck and the visibility that you will not be seeing the floors, or I don't even know if you'll see the roofs of the car, but you won't be seeing the headlights of the cars because of the angle of the view, plus the trees that will be there. In the season we're in now, you're going to have the 100 feet of existing vegetation, and then beyond that, these 18-foot trees, as you saw. Now, Randy did make an offer today that we were authorized by my client to make, that once the building is started and before the landscaping is done, we will offer to meet with the Walker Meadow people, thank you, on this slide. So if you look at all those trees, the 18-foot trees on the south side, all the way from the east to the west, if the residents at Walker Meadow would prefer that those trees be moved in any way, we are willing to do that if the planning board is willing to let us do that. I know that when we present the site plan, we're not supposed to make any significant changes. Jim was at the meeting, and I asked if we have to come back, and we sort of agreed that it would be de minimis. It would be the same number of trees, but if they want them same size, but if they want them clustered a little more, so long as they don't interfere with the growth of each tree, if they want them a little bit closer together or a little bit forward or a little bit back, we offered that we would make that decision with them, and I'm sure we would then have to come back to you with a revised plan. But we would also, and we indicated to the residents at Walker Meadow that we're certain that a condition will be that those trees be as we represented, and that if any of them do not live, they're going to come with a 2-year warranty of replacement. But even beyond that, whether it is this owner, one of the questions in their letter was, what if they sell the dealership to somebody else? Will the new owner abide by the conditions? And the answer to that is they have to, yes, absolutely. So we agreed that those trees would be there in perpetuity, and if any of them die, they would have to be replaced to the 18-foot character that we've been talking about. And that would shield a lower level lights that Hazel was just referring to if somebody is driving due south, either off the ramp as they do the U-turn, or if they're coming from further up adjacent to the west side of the building and they're coming down. Those trees will be very effective in blocking light. As Jim pointed out, there is always light that you'll be able to see, whether it is moonlight, whether it is other lights on the building. They certainly are able to see the lights of the buildings that are in back of them now and that are actually closer. So they may see some area that is more lit than complete darkness, but they will not see the light. There will be no glare, no light pointed towards them, no glare as defined in your bylaw. And it will be, that's a significant change from what we came into last time. A lot of these, I'd like to just take 30 seconds and highlight the big changes. I know Randy went over everything, but moving the dumpster by almost 200 feet is significant. Moving the car wash, flipping it so that they now exit to the east, that's pretty big. The parking deck rails or cables are now going to be solid concrete walls that will effectively block lighting. You won't be seeing it. And by the way, on the second deck, the construction, and I'm not a construction expert, so Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ceilings are going to be these T-wall structures, and the lights will be recessed so that they will not see either the light fixture, and they certainly won't see the ground because of the knee wall that's there. Is that fair to say? Yep. Okay. On the traffic, we've agreed to change the traffic direction. On the landscaping, we're now offering them, if the planning board agrees, that if they want those trees moved in any way or clustered in any way, we offered that we would be willing to do that. We just didn't want to put them too close because then as they grow, be crowding them out and they may not live. The reduced lighting after hours is new. So those are, as a result of their letter, my clients going back to the draft board with their lighting people, and with the other changes that have been made, those are pretty significant changes. Thank you. Oh, one last thing I'd like to point out. Randy did a great job of going over everything. I want to point out one thing that he did not say. The fueling station is a UL tested and fire resistant system with leak detection, but more importantly, from the point of Walker Meadow, it is going to be surrounded by 8-foot tall masonry walls on 3 sides, which will be east, south, and west. The only side not blocked by a masonry wall is going to be the front, where the cars fuel or where the filling takes place. But there will also be an alarm and fuel regulation in the event that there's any question whether fuel has been stolen from there or any leaks or anything else. But with those walls, it's not just going to be a tank standing there like you might find a fueling station at a gas station. This is going to be a contained area, and they were good enough to put up these concrete masonry walls to block the view of that also from Walker Meadow. Thank you.
All right, let's see. I think we were doing questions from the board. Hazel, you were done. Pete, you had anything else? John? Yeah, go ahead.
So going back to the plantings, the Norway spruce, are they currently, the way that they were in the sightline perspective, are they going to hinder the existing deciduous trees? Because it looked like they were right under the limbs.
No, if we go, you can see on this one, so on that lowest level, most of the deciduous trees are down at the lowest elevation or to the left of those, and they're in the old right-of-way for the trolley line. And we'll be planting on an open area that's being regraded. So those are all next to them, and there are trees behind it, but those are in new regraded area. So they will not impact the existing
They're not going to be
woods.
under
No.
the deciduous trees?
No.
Okay.
And they will still get light from the east and from the west.
Okay. Can you get to the image with the overhead that has the trees shown?
The one, yeah, last,
that one.
there you go.
Is there any way to add trees staggered behind the fueling station? Because I understand that those are 18-foot trees and they will grow, but there are gaps. Is there any way to, I know you don't want to plant them too close to each other because then they're going to hinder each other from growing, but you can stagger them or plant rhododendrons, other evergreens.
Yeah, if you see where the former trolley line is labeled, and then right above that, you see all those trees right there, that whole area is entirely wooded, and the area that is shown as lawn between there and the trees that are proposed, the large evergreens, that right now is dense woods.
And what about north of the trees?
North of the tree,
Parking in the trees.
excuse me?
Between the parking and the trees. I know right where those two.
Today it's fairly dense vegetation.
And what is it going to be when you are done? Like this area right there? Yep.
Yep.
And then that area in that corner.
Yeah, so again, we were leaving some of that as open area so snow storage could happen in there.
Okay.
So some of it will be on the parking lot, but we need a few areas that we can push it over the edge. So those green areas are lawn that would stay that way. And then about where the row of evergreens are shown on there, the individual ones, that's right at the tree line today. So everything from that backwards, as you can see in the aerial picture, that's dense woods.
And
So
that's going to remain, that's not going to be disturbed.
it's going to stay, yeah. And so what we were suggesting, I think in one of our earlier responses, was that we go out at some point in time with the appropriate members of the town and really look at that and select the material that's still good. There are some trees in there that are, I think we've located a few of them, 10 to 20-inch maples and 10, 20-inch oaks in there. So there's some big stock in there that's clearly worth saving. So I think the best thing, as we were saying, is maybe when we get to a point where, let's say it's winter months, the leaves are down, and we've got the building corners staked, that would be a good time to go out and walk it. And even if the residents want to come and look at it and say, okay, those three have to stay in the corner, that's the most important part. But if we, slide these three over and move those two over and save certain vegetation, we can flag it and show it, and that would remain. But there's a lot of good material in there that's worth saving.
Okay. Jim, correct me if I'm out of bounds on this one. The facade is going to be beige. Is the renderings that you've shown, is that the actual coloring?
Yes.
Is there any way, and this is kind of out of the box, the facade that's facing Walker Meadows, is there any way to paint it in a way that it blends into the existing greenery and sky?
Like invisible?
Or like a greenish color rather than a beige. A beige might stand out, right?
Yeah, can you, Nick can maybe.
I would love to paint the building a different color, but that is Hyundai required program. The franchise dictates that to
Even the
us.
side that's not forward-facing?
1,000%.
Unfortunate.
It's pretty light and
It is.
benign.
The
It's
light is the
actually-
problem. I think if you have a light background with trees, you're going to see the lighter background. If it was a greenish or a darker color, it might blend in with the trees and not stand out because you've
But
got that contrast.
I think in the winter it'd be the opposite.
Fair.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
if I may, I have 4 pictures that were sent to me by the owner of one of the buildings to show just how thick the vegetation is in the rear of the existing buildings. looking
Use the
towards
microphone,
Rockland.
Mark.
Do you have those?
The microphone.
Marshall, could you use the microphone?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I have some pictures that were given to me from the owners of one of the buildings, of the vegetation behind the buildings. If you don't mind, I'll be happy to just show you.
Sure.
This is a picture taken.
Is this letter?
No, I don't think so. This is Exhibit B and evidence sample.
If you go back to the existing up top. Or the next one maybe, and then the left hand. Yeah.
And all of this vegetation is proposed to remain?
Sorry?
All of this vegetation is proposed to remain?
Yeah, they'd go in and clean all the stuff that, dead, dying, and all the other junk, and then really select stuff. And that's at the back of that existing parking lot of 182. So the tree line right through there, that's where a lot of that vegetation is. It's really just an overgrown forest, so it needs to be manicured.
John, just to kind of help you, if you look at the photo that's provided by homeowners, I think you've got that photo up.
Yep.
So you look at the top two photos, the trolley line is elevated there. That berm is, at the top is flat. There's a trolley line there, so you can see that a portion of the view that you see from this window, through this window, blocks the elevation of the building anyway.
Yep. Just two more. The lights, is there any spillage above the lights? I know that they're shielded down, but any reflection so that there's going to be light pollution in the sky, that type of thing?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Can you go back to the light fixture? You can see it's solid on the top.
Well, you would be looking at the floor for what I'm
but
asking.
there's nothing
If
shining
you
down.
look at the one on the left, that's on the far left side, that says external house side shield, you can see how they're pointed just down.
Right. I was getting at more of, we see the light and how it's cut off, but since it's laying on the ground, you don't see what would be on top of the light, right? And so there might not be any spillage because it's all directed downward, but there may be
The
reflection.
position it is on the floor is not the position it would be on the pole.
Okay.
So as you see, the floor behind it and the wall behind it is dark. The space behind it and the space above it is going to be dark.
All right. The last question I have is, I discussed solar at the previous meeting, and I didn't hear any addressing of that from you. Is there going to be any solar? And if there's not going to be any solar, I would like to know why solar is not being proposed, either on the parking lot or on the rooftop.
That's something I think we had to respond.
And
I don't want to hear that it's Hyundai's policy not to have solar.
No, Hyundai does not have a policy about that. We're still investigating solar. We're not actively putting it on projects, simply because we're still investigating the longevity of it and what happens to it after it's done being used.
What does that mean?
Well, there's some research that I've done that shows that the solar panels actually become hazardous material after they're done 15 to 20 years. So we're still investigating some of that. We're not just, putting it in all of our facilities.
That seems like a stretch. I'm sorry. Solar is being promoted everywhere in the country. And to say that you guys are doing your own research saying that it might be hazardous, I think is a little off.
Well, I mean, we've done probably 15 or 20 ground-mounted solar projects that are anywhere from 1 meg to 10 megs, up to 60 acres or so. And you're now required, when you file an application for a solar project in Massachusetts, to file a decommissioning plan with each project. And really, like Nick is saying, it's at some point the panels become useless and you need to take them away. And what's happened in some towns, the developer who built them has already left town and the panels are sitting there and the project becomes defunct. So the town now makes you submit a financial plan to show how you're going to decommission the project at the end. So
That's not what he's saying.
No, but I mean, I think it's the same. They get to a part where they've useful life is gone, and then you've got to replace
but the useful life is 25 years. I mean, we're trying to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels here, right?
I understand.
And I think you guys have a chance to be a leader in Westborough and in Massachusetts of having all of this parking area covered by solar, or at least this large rooftop that's not on the screen anymore, covered by solar, and really be an example for how you can use renewable resources while also operating a fossil fuel sales place. And I think the arguments that you're making are not genuine. I don't think they're reasonable. And I think it needs to actually be investigated a little bit harder to see how much that can benefit you, because I think if you're using the power from the solar, it's going to probably save you money. And I think you have a chance to be a leader in this community for that.
I understand that, and we'll look further into it. I would like to point out that we are including a number of EV charging stations for both the public use and our use on the site as a green initiative.
And that's great. That's great. But I think you can go a little bit further and get some solar on there as well.
What type of heat are you going to have in the building?
Heating?
Yes.
That's all I have. Nope.
That's all you have.
Yep.
John?
I'm all set.
Couple of things. Randy, could you go back to, I think it's 2 slides before this? No, go, yeah, that one. So on the parking deck, you've got 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 rows of light poles. And you've agreed to lower those from 20 to
15 and a half.
Okay.
There's going to be a 3-foot base and then 12.5-foot pole.
Okay. But down in the parking lot, those are going to stay at 20 feet? Is there a reason those weren't lowered?
On the second level?
No, in the main parking lot, in the rest of the parking lot.
They're further apart, and so they're really still left at 20 feet has been the standard requirement in Westborough for auto dealerships for years, so we left them at that, but they're further apart, so there's not as many of them.
Okay.
And certainly the landscape.
I think you made the point earlier that the one closest to the condos, on the far left of this, on the parking deck?
The light?
Yeah, the light pole closest to the condos on the top
Right there.
parking deck, that one, right?
Yep.
That one's the one most likely to be seen from the condos. If that were lower, would that angle effectively make it impossible or less likely to be seen?
Yeah, just go to the perspective then again for a second. So those are the 2 lights there.
Those two, if those
Yeah.
were lower, would you have a harder time seeing those from the condos?
I don't know if that's something that can be looked at, if just those 2 poles at the end there, those 2 were lowered a little.
And while we're on this slide and looking at that section, there were originally, if you look on the west, the east, and the north, see how the poles are right at the edge of the parking lot to the wall? There were originally similar parking lights on the south wall, but they've been moved.
No, I realize those have been moved and lowered, but I'm just concerned with those two.
Yeah.
Because I think that I think you're right, that the angle from the condos up to the deck, you won't see any of the other ones that are further
I mean,
north. But those two, I think you're most likely to see.
Okay, yeah, we can
Can you
definitely look at
just investigate maybe lowering those alternatively, or maybe not alternatively, but could those 2 be 2 of the ones that are turned off at night? I know you said every other light, but I was, again, I realize you have site security to be concerned with, but I was hoping that the lights that would be turned off would be the ones closest to the condo at night. And now, again, I realize the fuel station's still there, you're concerned with fuel security, and somebody, maybe there's some you could leave on, but could we turn off as many of those as possible?
Yeah, let's look at that.
Rather than having just go and saying, well, count off by 2s or whatever, and every odd number light gets turned off. I'd rather be selective about which ones are being turned off, because the ones at the Route 9 side of the site are probably not going to be seen.
Great.
But I think the ones that are most likely to bother the neighbors are the ones closest to Walker Meadow.
Definitely.
On the traffic issues, well, I'm sorry, by the way, I greatly appreciate the efforts that you've done to address these concerns. I think you've aside from the solar, you've really tackled these and tried to come up with some reasonable solutions. The only exit now that you're proposing is the northwest. What is the grade there? Is that
Flat.
it's flat, and how far is it flat? Because I know currently it goes down pretty steep.
Yeah, can you see the contour? Well, you can kind of see the contours on there. So those are 2-foot contours. I can't tell from that scale how far apart, but.
So it'll be 298, the whole, I'm just concerned with a car carrier coming out of there and having to,
No.
be on a hill.
It's
hard
roughly-
enough for a car carrier to accelerate out of there. I think the way it's angled will make it easier for cars to get out, or particularly for the trucks to get out. But I just want to make sure that they're not going uphill trying to get onto Route 9.
Yeah. No, I believe the grading in the front of the building is at roughly 1%. It's as flat as we would make it. We wouldn't go any flatter if we could.
Right, okay.
And that corner over there, I believe, is 2% as you're leaving. So it's flatter than any, road in Westborough that needs a leveling area. So it's very flat.
And I know Ron left. Do you know how far it is between that driveway and the next driveway? I guess that would be the CarMax driveway,
From this driveway,
to the next driveway.
on this site, the two,
I think it would be the CarMax driveway. It doesn't show on this.
going east?
Yeah, you know how far it is?
I don't.
Okay, maybe we could get that answer. That might make a difference to me. Last of all, I saw on a couple of the slides the reference to the B-Walt easement. Can I take that as an affirmative that the applicant is willing to work with the town on that easement?
Yeah. Do you want to make any official?
Yeah, we received additional information from the town on the size of the easement, and we're very much looking forward to working with the town to grant them that easement with the project approval.
Okay.
If I could, one of the differences from the last meeting.
Use the mic, please. Sorry, Marsh.
One of the distances from the last meeting to now is the applicant has been provided with 2 state statutes that give protection to someone who has given an easement for recreational purposes to a municipality or government. And so it shields that grantor of the easement from liability. That was a major factor that they were concerned about. Talking with Jim and Randy, myself, I think they feel much more comfortable about that.
Yeah, and we also changed the bylaws in Westborough to allow that to count as open space.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Those are all of my questions. Jim Robbins, you,
I think you've covered everything. I don't have anything to add.
okay, then we'll turn to the public. Does anyone in the public wish to address the board on questions of the applicant or Patrick? Go ahead. Just name and address, just for. Do you want to use the mic? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get. Well, you're loud, all right, but maybe not loud enough.
That's the one from Wayne.
Thanks, Patrick. Sorry.
Patrick Welch, 15 Chauncey Circle. I also serve on your select board and on Sustainable Westborough. So one question and one point. First of all, you mentioned the EV charging stations. I don't see them on the diagram, and you also mentioned public use of those stations, so I'm curious about how the traffic flow would work wherever those are placed, being that you only have one driveway in and out for traffic. And then my other point was I would just like to support, on behalf of Sustainable Westborough, John's point in regards to the solar panels. I think they would greatly improve the property in regards to its greenhouse gas reduction, as well as cost reduction for things like snow removal, as well as power consumption by the business. So just an additional thought there. Thank you.
Yeah, there are charging stations at the front of the building. There's a couple of level 2 charging stations out here in the front. There's another one. There are 2 additional ones on this parking lot, and a third, I think, the future wiring set up for a level 3 so that you could get it really from any side of the building. But there were multiple ones, and they are shown on the site plans.
Yeah, just to echo that, I'm pretty convinced that gas vehicles are, going to be obsolete in another 20 years or so. And you're not going to have gas stations, you're going to have electric vehicle charging stations. And, I think I don't know if you could explore the idea of electric heat powered by your own solar panels. It'd be a cost saver for you. It would be, as John said, really you could be a leader in this. And, again, I'm not asking you to reinvent the wheel, but I think it would be a beneficial change to the project. All right, any other comments or questions? Mr. Webster.
Wayne Webster, 3 Essex Way. I will not mention traffic since we've already discussed that. I'm the chairman of the board of the trustees for the villages at Walker Meadow and the direct abutter to the proposed Hyundai Auto dealership at 180 to 182 Turnpike Road. The comments I'm going to give you will be in response to the materials received from Attorney Gould on Thursday evening and review of those materials today at 2 o'clock. We do appreciate their attending, coming to Walker Meadow and visiting us and spending some time. Documents coming to us 3 days before a public hearing are difficult. It's not unusual. That's how they seem to happen here. There are 100 homeowners at Walker Meadow, and it gets very difficult to bring them all together and try to figure out what the next response is. This has been fairly consistent behavior. I don't think it's the fault of Attorney Gould. I think things are being generated in Florida, and he's waiting for those things. For example, on Thursday, he contacted me at 9 o'clock in the morning and said, could we have a meeting tomorrow? And I said, no, we can't do that tomorrow, but we tossed around some other dates. And we thought about Tuesday. There were no materials ready for us to review on Thursday. And at 4 o'clock, I said I'd confirmed with the steering committee and with some residents, and Tuesday looked good. And at that point, he still didn't have the materials. So it gets very short notice. I even took some criticism from residents today who said, why didn't you deliver all of this to us? For us to put together the response we gave you for the record took about 20 hours over the weekend to think through and be accurate. So things don't happen quickly. What we say here is a developer and their attorney aren't really respecting our time and the amount of time it takes to respond to issues here. And we would appreciate it in the future if they would do that. 24 hours to 2 days, 2 working days notice is just not enough. As we look at these drawings here, I kind of liken them to COVID. It's getting better, but it's still with us. This is not a solution. Mostly what we get in the comments, and it's in that document that you have, are very nonspecific. If you read Mr. Gould's letter to us from Thursday night, most of what we have says, it'll be okay, we'll follow the rules, just trust us. And we're not buying that. We're not buying that. We need more detail. For instance I would give you is the gasoline storage, and I appreciate what he told us today and what he told me tonight, which is the bigger issue isn't that the tank's going to blow up. The issue is that people are going to come by and steal the gasoline. They're going to figure out a way, if they see it, to come in and steal it. Well, if you read the description, which is rather generic, it says it's double-walled tank, UL approved. It has all these safety things built in that are not specified. We can't look them up. We can't figure out what the UL rating is. We don't know much about the tank other than this very generic description with the cement wall around it. One would start to ask, if we can get it so secure that you don't have to worry about the hazard from the fuel, from a spill or it catching on fire or blowing up or anything else, why can't you figure out a way to lock it up so that we don't have to worry about people stealing gasoline, and thus you can put it someplace else and we don't have to look at it. The attractiveness of an 8-foot tall concrete wall is not all that terrific. If we look at that drawing right there on the right, the left side, at our left, that's 25 feet taller than the far right entrance. That's a 25-foot gradient drop. So those cars are actually above those trees that are going to be put in. Trees are 18 feet. That's 25 feet higher. Those cars are going to be much higher, and they're going to come down. So what we get constantly is two-dimensional drawings. That's all we saw tonight is two-dimensional drawings. It's really hard to look at this lot as a two-dimensional drawing and understand what's happening left to right. It's very, very difficult. In fact, the first time I saw it, I went, not so bad. Not so bad. But it is bad when you figure that's 25 feet taller. One of the things that happened when we first started out this conversation was that there was sort of a reticence to get together with us, not by Mr. Gould, he was happy to do it, as was Mr. Waterman, but from the Florida side, because I think they were a little concerned that since we're a 55-plus community, we were a bunch of old people who were just going to sit and complain. And we would continue to say that we're a group of highly educated people, from lawyers and architects and engineers and all kinds of people who have been very successful in their lives and understand the state statutes, the town bylaws, and can get through almost any conversation. What we're looking for in any response is reviews by competent engineers. We don't just want to hear, we had it looked over and this is what our lighting person said. So if we think about lighting, I could invite you all down to Bay State Common right now. Those are directional lights at Bay State Common. When you drive out of Bay State Common and I look beyond where the light poles are, it's not pitch black on the other side. Light goes all over the place. It bounces off the hot top, it bounces off the cars, it bounces off everything. So we don't step, if we look at the foot candle representation here, it looks like as soon as we step off the site, it's pitch black. It's not. Even been talking to Mr. Robbins today, he said there's going to be a glow. There's going to be a glow from there. So we're going to look up and see this thing. That's the way it is. Looking at the representation of the sight line for the houses, I was struck by the fact that the house that's represented in that drawing appears to be a 2.5-story American four-square. We live in single-story Cape Cod houses. So the sight line is not straight across. It's this way, right up and over the trees. It's very, very different. And in fact, on Lower Wessonville, those houses, if you were to go to those houses and stand outside, you would see that you look up this way and there's a very large, you have to climb up a hill that's about at this angle to get up to those, to get up anywhere looking anywhere even with those lots. Those houses are lower than that. And so those pictures you see in that report are out of somebody's window in that area, but looking this way. So yeah. I'm not very good at this. I won't tell you for a minute that I had any more than drafting in 8th grade. But when I look at this, wrong house, wrong sight line, you look at the other buildings that are there, this is a much larger building. This is a tremendously large building as compared to what's there already. Mr. Gould and Mr. Waterman point to the second building on site, the 2-story one. Well, it sits way back. You know, there's a difference. You can see the lower one is closer, the other one was farther back. We see it, but we don't see it. It's there and through the trees, it's not bad. But when at the top of this drawing, I think were the other buildings, and that's a huge difference. If you look at where that brown building is and compare it to what's going to be there, what's being proposed to be there, the massing of that structure is certainly different than this. Certainly different than this. And I would say that were we to have a true 3-dimensional drawing, not this side cut that kind of maybe looks like what we have, we would see a Walker Meadow house at a much lower level. Yes, they're separated by about 150 feet or so. I think Mr. Waterman said it was about 150 feet from the back of the building into the houses. I'd like to bring up another thing. And this speaks to our ability to understand what's really going on here. And I'm not questioning for a minute that it's an auto dealership. But their ability to put in front of us accurate details seems to be really limited. And what I mean by that is that when I look back at the drawings that were submitted to you all on 6/24, in the table on those drawings, which showed the original building, it said there were 435 parking spaces. Remember that number. On the August 9th meeting, we came and Hazel Nurse asked a question about the number of parking spaces. And what was said was that Hyundai requires 325 and we have 335. The people sitting at that table said They require 325. We have 335. Now, how do I know that? I read the minutes from that meeting. Ms. Nurse went on to ask more questions about parking, and she asked specifically about the decks as she did tonight. And we were then told that there were 237 spaces around and 138, I think, on the parking decks, which comes out to 375. So 435, 325, 335, 375. You would think, at least I would, if I was running a dealership and I sold cars, that I'd want to have a spot for every car. And I would like to think that I would match those two things up so I didn't have cars piled up one on top of each other, but we don't seem to have much accuracy. This also holds true as we looked at the drawings. We came down to visit with the planning department and pulled out the drawings and looked, and on the August 9th meeting, what was said, and again in the minutes, is that the footprint for the building is about 47,000 square feet. So we kept looking at the online drawings, and they're small, and you can't see things. We came down here and poured through, and we found the XY. And when we did the math, it wasn't too hard. There's 60,000 square feet. I don't know which one's right. But you would think that we'd want to get it correct. We'd want to have the right answer, and we want to be able to repeat things like parking spaces. Solar panels. I love the idea. It's a good idea. And one of the problems we had today was we finally understood how we got to the 60% and 40% for the coverage. And that is that they're using the B-Wall trail to make up the difference. Now, it's perfectly legal that they do that. But you might ask, well, if you're going to use that to make up the difference in the 60 and 40, there's all kinds of places there. You could do all kinds of solar stuff. The room is there. It's just going to be empty and used for nothing. You could be creative and do things with it. If they're going to own that, I think it's, is it 0.7 of a mile? Something like that. Mr. Waterman, how long is that piece that goes from the...
Half a mile.
Half a mile?
Just under.
Yeah, so just under half a mile, green space. Maybe you could do something with it, I don't know. To do something with solar. Let me see. Here's a question for you. Remember the diagram that showed the 0 foot candles on the outside of the property? If that's the case, and light's kind of an interesting thing, but if that's the case, why would they offer to turn the lights down in the evening? I'm thankful that you are offering such a thing. But why offer to turn them down if, in fact, you've solved the problem and there's 0 foot candles on the edge of the property? Ostensibly, this is like the old soap opera, The Edge of Night. You know, it's pitch black on one side and it's light on the other. Of course, we know it doesn't work like that. So there's the edge of the property. What we were told tonight is everything over here, there's no light coming from the property over. Well, the answer is that there is. There is. There's light that comes from Carmex. There's light that comes from Route 9. There's light that comes from Walker Meadow over to a treetop. There's light that goes everywhere. It just happens. And so the offer to turn every other light off is a great offer, and we don't reject it. But I think these two-dimensional, simple solutions don't get to what is actually happening. And we need to see more. We need to see manufacturers. We need to see three-dimensional plans. We need to really be able to look in this, as I assume the town does as well, to understand what's going on. The only thing I'll say about traffic is please, please, please do the peer review. It's clearly needed based on the comments this evening. Let me see. So the last thing we'll say is that our goal here, obviously, is if this has to happen, that it has to be the least intrusive for Walker Meadow, and clearly all of you are trying to do that as well, and thank you. But we're not going to get there without accurate three-dimensional drawings and lots of information that gives us, the town and us, the ability to go back and look exactly how they're going to do things. There are lots of ways to skin this cat. We're not against having a car dealership there or anything else that wants to be there, but we don't see any reason why we should bear the brunt of it, whether it's light, noise, or any other kind of pollution. The car wash, for example, is going to dump all of its effluent into the sewer system. I don't know that we even know how many gallons it's going to dump every day. I have no idea. I have no idea. Do appreciate moving it around, though, so the lights aren't coming toward Walker Meadow. That was a good idea. But it's just things like that that continue to pop up that if you look at Attorney Gould's letter to us, he did absolutely the best that he could, I'm sure of it. But it's not very specific. It basically says, trust us, everything's going to be okay, we'll follow the rules. And, you know, I think it was President Reagan who stole a quote from the Russians and said, you can trust, but you need to verify. And we're asking you to do the same thing. Thank you.
All right.
Question? Randy, did you state at one of the public hearings that the car wash used recycled water?
I'm sorry, that the,
Okay,
I didn't hear that.
thank you.
Any other comments from, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Greg Michelle. I live at 8 Quaker Way, Walker Meadow. So I got a few comments. On the drawing that we've seen where the solid walls now exist on the 3rd floor, the rear of the building, there's still a gap below that the 3rd floor. There's a gap. Is that planned to be solid as well?
No, that's for ventilation so air can get out, but the cars are driving so they would be pointing directly at that 42-inch tall wall.
So you're not going to get
So no
leakage?
lights could come out that space at all.
Okay, fair enough. I'm concerned about drainage issues. I don't know whether, can you show us the site plan again?
The timeline?
Drainage issues.
Okay.
This site slopes front to back and left to right,
Correct.
basically. And so all of the drainage running off of that huge area of hard surface is going to come off the back towards the the B-Walk Trail and Walker Meadow. And so I'm concerned about the amount of water that's going to run off there.
Sure.
You're talking about shoving snow off there, which will add to the problem. And we got this lovely 60-40 split. You know, there's this nice piece of hard standing here, and that's only 40% coverage because there's 60% with all of this strip. The only thing is the water comes down. It's not going to run towards Park Place because it's uphill. It's all going to run down towards Walker Meadow and down into this triangular area to the right. Wetlands, flood zone, floodplain. So I'm concerned about the impact of that, and you know the town ought to know about that. And the last thing is that we're talking about sewage running from this property into the sewage system, and I'm a little concerned about that because half of Walker Meadow drains into the sewer that goes along behind Carmax, etc. So if there is any kind of major problem with the sewage system or a backup, a blockage, it's going to come out, back up all into these houses that are in this cul-de-sac at the far end here. Oh, and just one other little comment. Some of the houses that are on Deerfield, which is they're looking towards the parking area there, I think they may be impacted by lighting issues. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to reply to the drainage question?
Sure, go ahead.
Jerry, if you can just zoom out on that so you can kind of see both at once. So the picture on the left, that's the existing condition. So you can see there's 2 large office buildings. There's quite a bit of pavement on those 2 sites already today. And the site on the left has essentially minimal drainage system. There's a couple catch basins. The site on the right has 2 catch basins that are infiltrative catch basins. They just fill up with water and they're supposed to drain into the ground, but they're both filled, so they just run right over that. So all of this drainage comes down that parking and the pavement and comes down to the wetland, which is in the lower right-hand corner, and it's undetained, it's uncleaned, and it's not filtered in any way whatsoever. So that's the current condition. With the proposed system, we have catch basins starting up at the entrance coming off of Route 9, and those are connected down to an area behind the proposed building. And then the drainage on the right is connected in catch basins that come down behind the building. So there are catch basins now that will be installed to pick up all of the runoff from the building roof and the parking lots. And then that water will be drain to underground infiltration system directly behind the building, and that's where the water would get polished, stored, detained, and infiltrated, which doesn't happen today, and then it would discharge to a small head wall at the back of the site that discharges towards the east along the base of the railroad, old railroad bed. So this doesn't connect directly to the condominiums at all. It actually runs out through a new system that meets DEP and conservation standards, eliminates the existing silt that's running off the site now, and then this would discharge down past to the end of this site and then back under the old railroad bed downstream from and unconnected to the condominiums. So a brand new system that's fully designed to meet DEP and town conservation standards. I could also reply to some of Wayne's comments if I could just take a minute. Sure. So he made a bunch of different points. We were just over there today, so I'm surprised that he didn't mention any of those today. So just now, apparently there's a new letter that has a lot of these that I hadn't heard till just now. But the deadline that he talked about for getting the plans, that's the deadline that was talked at the last planning board meeting where he was present, and we were told to have a response back to the Walker Meadow residents by Thursday of last week, which we did, and to include all the plans, which we did. So it was good enough for the planning board to get it then, but somehow not for him. And if he needed copies, all he had to do is contact us. We've talked to him multiple times. Certainly Marshall has through email. So we would be happy to do that. We offered again today to give him, reduced copies if he needs them. But so that seemed a little strange. The slope that he talked about, yes, there's a 25-foot slope coming down and we're planting 18-foot tall trees, and his response is, well, then everything up here is much higher than the trees. But he's forgetting that there are trees that are 60 feet tall, as shown on our cross-section. We located the top of the canopy on that view, so those are correct. Those are the right height. So those trees in many areas, those are 60-foot tall trees. So yeah, the site drops 25 feet, but you got 60 feet tall high trees between the homes and the building. So I think he's forgot about the part that there's some existing vegetation. The fuel storage plans, if he wants more detail on that, we've explained what it is, that's in the drawings, but those are at the building department. So he can go down to the building department and get scaled plans of the fuel system and all of the methods of protection and alarms and, double tanks. That's called out on the plans, and those are on file at the town. So he can certainly get those at the building department. He mentioned the street lights at Bay State Common. I mean, that's a project that we did. We spec'd the lights over there. Those don't have any down shields. Those are old styled historic lamps that just point straight up and straight down, and they have 360-degree cast. These are the opposite. So these are new high-tech, directed straight down with down shield. So these are nothing like what's happening over at Bay State Commons, totally different design. He mentioned also that the house that was drawn on our section is wrong. Again, we take offense to that. These are pictures of the house that we show on there. We went out, stood on the embankment, took pictures of the condominiums, and we've drawn them to the same scale as what they really are. And I think one of his members today commented that, I have a one-story house and you're showing two-story. But as you can see in these pictures, the lower elevation is a walkout basement, and then the elevation above it is the single story that he's talking about. And that's exactly what's shown. You can see it in these pictures probably a little better. This is the lower set of windows. This is the upper set of windows in the living space. And then that's the roof above. That's exactly what we drew. We don't make these up. We actually go take pictures of structures and draw them to scale. So that is all the scale. And so I kind of take exception to that one a little bit. He mentioned that the large office building that's shown on the upper view there is no big deal. So I guess I'm a little surprised at that. You can see the height of it. There's certainly lights on the back of the building at the second level as well as the first level. So I would think that's something that they would see regularly during the winter where it's higher and there's not that much, hiding it right now. So the parking count, we were asked multiple times at different meetings, but I have my notes here from the 7/19 meeting and the numbers that I've given, and I've been asked 3 or 4 times at these hearings how many parking spaces. I think Hazel asked as well as other members, and we've told everybody on 2 different occasions the numbers haven't changed. There's 198 spaces in the 2 parking decks. There's 237 spaces on the surface lots, and there are 435 total. And as we told you, the parking code requires less than that. but that's what Hyundai requires, and so that's what's been in the count. That's exactly what I've reported every the hearing, and that certainly could be checked easy enough, so just wanted to.
Randy, can you address the building size?
The building size, the exact size of the building is 56,000, I think, and there's probably different things in the plan, because as you can see, if you, well, go to that plan, for instance, I mean, you can see the footprint in white of the dealership, and then if you include the area where they bring cars in, I don't know if that's including the service area, that little bump out in the lower right-hand corner right there, that's the quick lube area, and I don't know if somebody was taking an aerial view of this and saying, and they added the ramp. I mean, it's over an acre. I think it's around 50,000 square feet in total, but we could certainly get you that number, no problem. It's on the architectural plans. You have the real number? First floor is 46,573 square feet. And one other, you had asked a question about the distance from the exit on this site down to the CarMax entrance. Barry just checked that, and it's 900 feet.
I'm sorry, 900?
900 feet.
Okay. All right. Any other public comments, questions, sir?
Hi, John Persia, One Shaker Way. Randy, I wonder if you could address the question. We talked a little bit about snow removal earlier today.
Yep.
And I've been trying to do some research on it, and I'm under the impression the Commonwealth is encouraging people to have snow storage on site and on ground so that it's being absorbed into the water. But I don't see any place for you to have snow do that. Everything seems to be hot-topped, or you've got trees. Or you've got the 200,000 square feet that runs from park to, how are you going to remove all this snow?
So that was one of the comments that one of the boards had earlier, and we had a couple of small areas shown on the site that were on pavement and a few that were in lawn areas that were called out to be snow storage. Obviously, with the amount of pavement that you see in this area of the site, we don't have enough area to push it to all the side areas. So we have a couple areas that we've enlarged on the current design plans, and we have also called out some temporary storage areas so the town will know that snow will be stored in bigger storms in one or two particular areas on the site, and then we've added notes to the plan that says they will have a snow removal contractor on site and hired to remove snow from the site. So it's more expensive to remove it from the site, but that's what they're going to have to do because they just don't have enough area to push it around.
So instead of a passive system, it's an active system. You have to do things versus having it just pile.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
My name is Samantha McDonald. I represent the owner of 182 Turnpike. And in listening to some of the concerns, and there seems to be a feeling like if this continued use of the office building would be the best outcome here. My client has been impacted by the pandemic. Office space is not the investment that it used to be. Selling this property is something he is going to do, and selling it for an office seems to be a very unlikely outcome. Far more likely is another commercial use. It fronts on Route 9. It's just going to be a commercial use. In my experience, some of the other options that could be considered for this site would probably have significantly worse impacts. I know that a Stop and Shop is located nearby, and I'm sure you all know that one of the things that grocery stores love to do is locate near each other for competitive purposes. I can't see how that could be possibly any less of an impact, and I would suspect it would be significantly more, particularly with the trash, than a dealership with maybe 75 employees. So, something to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your input. We're not considering a different use, though we're considering this use. So we're just trying to improve this use to the, and believe me, I do want I want the owner of 182 to be successful. So I'm not trying to inhibit that.
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to point out that it's highly unlikely it's going to stay what it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, this is going to be continued. We're not done with this by any means. I think we have an open question on the peer review of the traffic study. I'd like to take that up now. Can I ask how much that is? How much does that cost?
We have not received a scope yet from our consultant.
And historically, any ideas?
Around $10,000.
You know, I really hate to spend your money on something I'm not 100% convinced is necessary, but my personal feeling is that the neighbors feel like it's necessary. They're concerned about traffic, and I think they would feel more comfortable with the results of that peer review study. So I'm leaning towards requiring it. Does anyone have any comments?
Have we gotten any feedback from town staff as to if they feel it necessary? Jim or the engineer or Fred?
Well, Lisa left, but
We generally don't get much input from the town engineer. They'll follow our lead on that. So what we do is we evaluate what comes from the applicant's engineer, and if there's reason for us to be concerned about line of sight, stopping distance, then we would ask for a peer review. Those are the two things that we've been
Are
discussing.
you concerned about line of sight and stopping distance?
I am concerned about stopping distance, not line of sight. With the change in the protocol for the use of those driveways, I think that exiting traffic on the western driveway would be a real issue. Since they're willing to remove that, that takes away my concern for turning movements. There's turning movements that are greater right now with the office building because those employees are in the peak hour traffic. So you're going to have more turning movements with the current use than you would with the auto dealership because they're in the retail hour of traffic. They're going to have fewer employees at the auto dealership than they have at the office building during 100% use. So I think that the exiting traffic would be my biggest concern. And the exiting traffic not coming out of the western driveway anymore removes that concern for me. I'm trying to be objective here and not tell you what to do.
I had one, just.
Go ahead.
go ahead.
One thing I really would like people to think about is that the way this is set up as far as traffic for their trailers coming into the coming into the entrance where they're talking about them coming in, they're talking about using the breakdown lane to help them as they come down the hill there. I want to know what happens when we have a snowstorm and Route 9 is plowed and all the plowed snow goes into the breakdown lane and we have the car, or bad weather, and we have the car trailers coming over the hill there, and obviously they cannot pull over to the right because there's a big snowbank there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a picture from the residents with that tractor trailer, and it's a pretty wide, I mean, it's wider than just a breakdown lane. It's, I mean, you have room for a lot of snow and still have a full breakdown lane. So I'm not as concerned with that. I feel like that picture of that truck pulled over, I don't know if that truck was broken down, but I also know that the way that 182 site is, a truck that size would have trouble navigating the existing parking lot, and that may be why it pulled over. The proposed solution, that's not going to be an issue. As far as cars, car carriers parking on Route 9, that's not allowed, and that's an enforcement issue. That's not a design flaw. That's just an enforcement issue. And maybe we can talk to the chief about, better enforcement on that.
They do enforce loading and unloading of cars on Route 9. If they see them, if they catch them, they will make them move. And I explained this to the residents today, that if you see a car carrier on Route 9, call the police, don't call me, because that slows down the reporting process. Call the police, they need to catch them. And they do, they make them move. They make them move internal to the site. But if they don't catch them and they get away with it, it will continue.
Yeah. As far as the issue of people coming out of Park Street, I think that has more to do with the fact that the state went from 3 lanes down to 2 right there. And, you know, you've got people merging into one right-hand lane, everybody gets packed up, and now there's no spaces for people to come out on from Park. I'm not sure that this will be impactful on that. So I don't know how. The other thing is the exit now. Instead of cars coming out and trying to take a right angle, they're going to be angled towards Route 9 East. So it'll make, and it's flat, which was one of my concerns. So it seems like it'll make it easier for even a large vehicle to enter on Route 9 East. They won't have to enter both lanes of traffic to make the turn. So I don't know. Go ahead, Pete.
Jim, earlier you mentioned that you were more concerned about the on-site traffic and doing a peer review of the on-site traffic, right? So I'm concerned about the on-site traffic and how the trucks are going to flow, and I do think it is necessary to have an on-site review of the traffic patterns that are going in the daily process, with taking into account of everything that's happening on this property, or not just selling cars. And clearly, the people in the crowd have concern about the traffic on the highway, so on Route 9. So in my personal opinion, I think we need to check both those boxes to make sure that the site is flowing properly, as well as leaving the site or entering the site. So I don't really, as much as we've been arguing about the traffic on Route 9, I need to make sure that we don't run into a Burger King, Starbucks situation that that property didn't flow properly. And the only way we're going to make sure that that property flows properly is having this peer review. And I think it's necessary to have do it on site and do it on Route 9 and tackle this all at once. That's just my personal opinion.
So unfortunately, we did have a peer review on the Burger King and Starbucks.
No, I understand. I'm not trying to bring him up.
So that's a different issue. But
yeah.
All right, I guess.
Mark, could I say one thing?
Yeah, John, go ahead.
I just think the applicant has made the appropriate changes to the plan to resolve some of the traffic issues. I don't think a peer review is necessary. That's where I stand.
Could I just add one more thing to that, please?
Right.
I don't think it's obvious looking at the plans, but as you come off of Route 9 on that decel lane to turn into the site now, the site driveway is coming down almost at 15% at that throat, right where you turn into the site. So that does make it harder for large tractor trailers to make that corner, and then they go right down the steep hill. And if you've been out there, you probably remember that. It is steep. So our specific design in this was hold the decel lane into the site, but flatten that out to 10% as you come into the site. So we come in at 10% and then go down to 5%. So we're flattening that main driveway out quite a bit over its existing condition, right where it's most critical at that throat coming off of Route 9. And then other than that, the parking lots are just like any other parking lot in town. There's a 20-foot wide access driveway and 20-foot wide parking spaces. So, I'm not sure what somebody would look at if you said, let's do a study on the parking lot. We've already run the fire truck around this and shown it to the fire department. The fire truck fits everywhere on the site, as do the car carriers. There's really not a heck of a lot to look at. It's the exact same design that you have in your code, 24-foot forward drive. So,
Jim, what was your concern that you brought up earlier? You didn't.
So circulation internal to the site, this is a huge parking lot. And at pinch points on the corner for large vehicles, whether it's car carrier or one of our local fire trucks, I want to make sure it can circulate given the amount of parking that we have on this site. It's very tight. That's why they have the parking decks.
Jim, can you just clarify for me? There was a question raised by the Walker Meadow people on whether there needs to be a DOT approval on the access into this site?
So the DOT letter is basically a form letter. Any new use, whenever a site is reconfigured, has to apply for a DOT access permit. If they don't change the driveways, they're going to get the permit. And that's what they're showing here. They're going to get the permit. That's why I'm not so concerned about what's going on Route 9 and what's coming off Route 9. You'll get that kind of letter from Barry Lorien at District 3 every time there's a new use on Route 9. So for example, we mentioned Burger King earlier. They had a DOT access permit. They actually had a more difficult hurdle because they reconfigured their driveways. Marshall can tell you that because he was their attorney. This site does not have a new location for a driveway, and Marshall can comment on that as well because you've probably done 100 DOT access permits.
Thank you.
Marshall, go
I'd like
ahead.
to add one more thing. I've heard multiple people, primarily from Walker Meadow, talk about people are going very fast downhill on Route 9 going eastbound. I've been doing this permitting for a long time, and I've enjoyed working in Westborough for a long time. And I just want to tell you, I've probably learned more from years ago, the captain of the police, Glenn Parker. Were you here when Glenn Parker was on the board?
He was on the planning board.
He was on the planning board, and after he got off, Dick Brady got on the board, and he, I believe, was a lieutenant on the police, and, you know, he was into the area of traffic. And, I'm sorry. And when I was permitting what was then called Stagecoach Plaza, which is where Uno's restaurant is, and there was an Outback, and there was the movie theater. To get there, people were going westbound on Route 9. And think about westbound. Before you hit 135, it starts to go downhill. And people go pretty quickly downhill, but those that stay to the right are going to either Route 135 or right after 135 was the entrance to Stagecoach Plaza. And I'll never forget this, Jim, you probably remember it. There were 79 people in the room opposing Stagecoach Plaza, primarily because they were saying that a movie theater is going to bring crime and litter and danger to children and all that type of thing. But the other comment that they were all making is you have cars going fast and then you have cars going slow, and that's going to cause lots of accidents as cars or trucks are moving to get onto either Route 135 or to get into Stagecoach Plaza. And I remember knowing that there was going to be a problem. Dick Brady was on the board, but Glenn Parker, who I believe had retired by that time.
No, Glenn actually was after.
But he came to the meeting, and they both said the same thing. They both said, we as police and traffic managers like any reason that slows traffic down. Because when traffic slows down, there are fewer accidents, and if there are accidents, there's less injury. Those people who say you can't slow down on the road because people are going so fast and you're going to cause an accident by banging into them, that's not what happens. People don't usually bang into trucks as the trucks are slowing down. If accidents are caused, it's because those fast drivers don't want to get, like somebody said earlier, I don't remember who said it, it might have been Randy or Ron, people who are going fast on Route 9, if they see trucks, they get into the left lane right away. Getting into this site is not going to cause accidents, whether it is a tractor trailer truck, whether it is a car carrier, because when cars slow down, the bigger the truck, the bigger the lights, and people will not cause accidents with them. And the trucks are professional drivers. These car carriers all own their own rigs. They're all independents. They're not employees of automotive management. They're not employees of Hyundai. Virtually all manufacturers use independent car carriers. Am I right? Yep. And these people are driving their own rigs. They're not going to drive recklessly. They're going to drive carefully. And I heard somebody saying, oh, we saw a car carrier coming out of CarMax, and they drove into 2 lanes. Well, I remember when we designed CarMax, and I remember we had our peer review person, I think it was from Manashangan, I think it was Scott Thornton, but I'm not positive. And I remember him saying, these are wide enough that nobody, whether it's a car carrier or a little car, will have to go into another lane. That's the design of Route 9 here. And if accidents happen, it's because people aren't driving carefully. It's not the design. And I just want to stress that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is your objection to the cost of the peer review or the time it would take?
Probably timing as much as anything.
Timing. They are under, I don't want to give too much personal information, but they, with Hyundai, were given a certain time frame to get their permitting.
Okay. How long would the peer review take, Jim, do we know?
Probably at least 2 meetings.
I don't think it's necessary, especially if it takes that long.
You don't have a scope yet for it, do
No,
you?
I'm saying at least 2 meetings.
Okay, to get that, then a couple of weeks probably to do an analysis, yeah, so it's probably a month anyway.
That's a long time.
Yeah, we've had Ron Mueller in here many times on both sides, both peer reviews and representing the applicant, and, I think he's done a good job on most of these projects that he's worked on. So I have a lot of confidence in his opinions. I don't know, but I think we've spent a long time on this, and we need to make a decision. We need to have a formal vote on this.
To do a peer review, I think you should.
We've already instructed the peer review, so I think the vote would be whether we don't want to do the peer review.
Yes. Let me say one other thing while you're discussing this is they're going to have to apply to Mass Highway to get an access permit. They're going to get it. Mass Highway may require them to do a couple things. As I'm looking at this that's up there, it's possible Mass Highway may say you're going to widen the throat of the driveway. They're not going to stop them from getting the permit, but they may attach conditions to it. So that will be something that will become part of the site plan. Just so you know that. It's not the end of traffic review for the site, because Mass Highway will look at that access permit.
So I'm a little conflicted on this. I think the image that the Walker Meadow group submitted actually kind of sways me probably in the direction they don't want to sway me. I'm just looking at this lane. It's a lot more room than I thought there would be.
Yeah, if you go out there, John, there's a ton of room. It's not your average entrance.
And just what Jim is saying, MassDOT is going to be more focused on the safety on Route 9 than we are. So it's really the internal circulation that would be the concern. I hear Pete's comments on that one. I don't think it's the same problem that you see with Starbucks and Burger King. It's not. There is going to be more traffic than just a dealership, but it's not going to be a coffee shop, restaurant.
I mean, it's not like all 400 cars are moving at the same time either.
So, I'm a little conflicted on whether it's necessary, but I think my biggest concern is the safety on Route 9, and I think MassDOT is going to really oversee that more than we will. And I don't think, based on the images and Ron Mueller's reputation, who I've also worked with on projects, like it's...
Yeah, I don't think Jim's point was that all 400 cars would be moving at one point. I think it was...
Ashley had asked us just to take that.
Of emergency vehicle getting around a parking lot that has packed 435 spaces?
I think they addressed that in one of those plans.
Yeah, but...
Well, I think they're certainly going to have to, the fire chief is certainly going to have to make sure, that's accessible, but in their own interest, if the car carriers can't, they're just as big as a fire truck. And if they can't navigate the site, then, they're going to have to come up with some changes. Bigger than a fire truck, yeah. All right, so we've been at this a long time. And sure.
Again, Wayne Webster, 3 Essex Way. So I'm listening to all of this and the amount of time that we're spending talking about this and whether there should be a peer review or not. And I'm thinking about all the time that gets spent while we wait for responses and then we're brought to this endpoint 2 days before a meeting and told we have to have a meeting, we have to sit down, we have to show you what we want. This is kind of the same. My question is if the applicant is so convinced that nothing will happen, what's to fear? What's to fear? They get a second opinion. We can all sit back and say, okay, it happened. We had a second opinion. They said there's nothing wrong. This is going to be fine. And we can all rest easy. I understand there's always timing, but there's no rush on their side to get anything done for us. Okay, nothing comes quickly to us other than a demand for meetings.
Mr. Webster, just to address that, right? The Thursday deadline is something that the board has had for a long time, that any revisions, submissions need to be in by the Thursday before the meeting. So in fairness to the applicant, I think they were working on the planning board's deadlines, and they didn't realize that you were hoping to have, a week notice or, and I think in the future they'll learn from that lesson. But I don't necessarily think it was an intended delay.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if there's nothing to fear here, then help the neighbors. Once this thing is built, if there's something wrong, it's going to be really hard to correct. So let's get it right the first time. That's all. I'm not saying don't build it. I'm saying let's get it right the first time. Let's see that peer-reviewed traffic study. For those of us who live near Route 9, we see it every day. We're not traffic engineers. Let's have another independent look at it, get it done, and it's over. We don't have to discuss it anymore. Thank you.
All right, so Jim, is there a way to get this review expedited?
I can do my best. MDM has a lot of work going on. We're their client. They have applicants in front of us that are their client. Right now, there's a lot of work going on. I can't push them. I can ask them.
Well, I think that, the carrot works better than the stick on this one. Is there a rush fee they could?
No. I can answer that. That's our biggest concern, I think, is really timing. Everybody is busy, and if it takes 2 weeks, I know when we got the tie and bond peer review, it took a couple of weeks to do that, then we had to come back to board to get a vote and so forth, and then they start their work, and so it took some time, and if these people are as busy as I assume they will be, and it takes a week or two to get a proposal, they typically wouldn't start till 2 weeks later at the earliest, and if it takes 2 weeks to do the review and turn it around, we're talking 6 weeks from today.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we haven't started that process. I mean, at the last meeting,
I thought we agreed at the last meeting.
Yeah, at the last meeting,
appear.
that's exactly my point. Here's the
And
last
look at how
meeting, we agreed that we wanted the peer review. Why
think
wouldn't that already?
It's taken so long for even that.
But we also did, at your request, remove the exit onto Route 9, and that's why we even brought up the question after Hazel had suggested the peer review, and then we agreed to make that change so that there's no exiting vehicles. So that really clearly makes it a safer condition. And as Ron said earlier, we meet all the separation requirements for sight distance and stopping distance on Route 9 at that location. And that's what a peer review person is going to look at. What is the DOT requirement, and do you meet it? You either do or don't.
And if I could add, in July, the Westborough Fire Department Emergency Medical Services did respond to the plans, and they asked for a couple of things, and Randy said, we've given them those things that they requested.
Yeah, we're just
So
making a few final
they
tweaks.
have
Barry's
looked at
met
the
with the
site.
chief, so, I mean,
Yeah, but the thing is that now you've changed the entrance and exit requirements, so therefore, I think Jim's point that we really need an in-site review of the traffic is more important than it was before. So I am still in favor of a peer review.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I feel like they've made a lot of changes, including that big change with the entrance, reversing the car wash. They're even going to look at maybe lowering some of the lights. And I mean, I'm much more concerned with the lighting issue than I am with the traffic issue. And I feel like we're going around and around on this, but I'm pretty convinced that peer review is going to come back and say, that there's no traffic issues. So, or at least confirm Ron's traffic study. So I just feel like spending money and time, again, I don't necessarily want to
I feel like we're doing
belittle
it
this
just-
issue, but it's,
Well, let's vote on it.
So did the fire department do a sweat path analysis with their largest truck?
We do one, and we have to use their vehicle, and we've submitted that to them.
And this is with the
They
new
did
layout?
ask for a change, and the change has been made on the plans.
But so they did the analysis with the new layout, correct? So it's all up to date?
With the new layout being this one?
Yeah.
We have run the new layout with the vehicle with this layout that you're looking at. We're in the middle of assembling our new drawings to address tie and bonds, and with that, we'll submit to the chief the updated drawings. And
So they haven't gone to the fire department, is what you're saying, is they haven't.
Not the new
They have
one,
not
but-
looked at those.
Correct.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, is that you've changed the drawings, so therefore, we still would need feedback from the emergency.
Yeah.
and
I would-
in that aspect.
I would be more concerned about the sweat path analysis for a fire truck being approved by the chief than a
Correct.
traffic study.
Yeah, I agree.
Traffic peer review.
Right.
If the chief signs off on it, that's what I'm okay with.
Right.
Me too.
no, again, I agree with that point, but Jim, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, I'm agreeing with John. I really am concerned about having our local fire department be satisfied
Yeah.
with the sweat path analysis.
So, all right, again, I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this. At some point, we have to make a decision, and sometimes we have to make hard decisions. Ma'am, I've entertained a lot of comments on this already. I just feel like we need to close the book on this issue and make a decision.
2.5 hours.
We've been at it 2.5 hours, and we have more public meetings ahead of us, so please come back and join us. I am going to make a motion to not require the peer review.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion of that motion? Okay, all those in favor of not requiring the peer review? All those opposed? All right, that's 3-2 in favor of not requiring the peer review. All right? I will also make a motion to continue this public hearing through October 18th.
We'd like to go in 2 weeks, but because of the Jewish holiday, I won't be here in 2 weeks. So I just did a letter, instead of having to give you another one October 4th. I don't want this meeting continued
Right,
to
so
the
we'll-
18th, but I've given you a letter that will cover it for the next 2 hearings.
All right, we'll read this letter into the record before I make that motion then. Addressed to the planning board regarding 180, 182 Turnpike Road. To members of the planning board, we're scheduled for a public hearing for a site plan review application on 180, 182 Turnpike Road on September 20th, 2022. Anticipating this may require additional hearing dates, I respectfully grant the planning board additional time to October 18th for continued public hearing. So my motion was to extend the public hearing through October 18th. That means it will be on the agenda for both October 4th and October 18th. It doesn't mean that we won't talk about it on October 4th. Is that the right date, the 4th?
Yes.
Okay. It just means that we won't close it on the 4th. We'll have at least until the 18th, so you won't have to ask for another continuance on the 4th.
And we will ask the engineers to go back. By the way, the revisions on the plan were the request to change from the westerly, making it entrance only. But we'll go back to the fire department and make sure that they are comfortable with the plan and have that answer for you by October 4th.
Okay. That being said, we have a letter, you have a copy of this letter from the residents.
To me today.
When can we get a response to that?
I think we've given the verbal response. To be honest with you, I like Wayne. I'm a little disappointed at the last 2 meetings. I feel like he's taking pot shot.
Look, again,
If I could
I
just say,
prefer
I
you didn't
understand.
address individuals.
But what I'm saying is, we had the meeting today. And the residents were wonderful. They asked a lot of questions.
Marshall, can you use the mic, please?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Everybody was respectful.
Marshall,
And I would
wanted
just
to-
ask
yeah.
Wayne
Okay.
if he's going to have questions, if he could ask us when we're meeting.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure, I haven't read this, we're all going to read this, but I would like you to read this and
I did.
prepare a written response.
Okay,
And
we'll do that.
Just asking, again, I don't know when you could do that, but if you can't give us a week before the 4th, then we'll take it up on the 18th, and I'd like to have the response a week before the 18th.
Okay.
So if you can't do it for the
Take care of
4th, I understand there may be a lot in here to respond to, but at least give a week before whichever meeting you're going to address that response so
Sorry
that
if
they
I
can
get
see the
upset.
written response. Okay?
Very
I
good.
will again make a motion to continue this public hearing through October 18th, with the understanding that it will also be discussed at October 4th.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second.
We're going
All
to
those in
transmit
favor?
back to them this week.
Okay, good.
That's 5-0 of continuance.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great night. I would ask you all to please expeditiously take your conversations outside so that we can finish our other business before midnight. You are optimistic. We're not done yet. All right. Next item on the agenda, I have a continuation of the public hearing for the earth-moving permit at 25 Gleason. I need to find my glasses. We have a letter requesting a continuance dated September 15th to the Westborough Planning Board regarding the special permit earth-moving for the Ward property at Gleason Street. On behalf of the Walter Ward and Milford, the landowner, and Milford Stone, the operator, collectively the applicants, we request a continuance of the public hearing scheduled for September 20th, 2022, until the planning board's meeting scheduled for October 18th, 2022. And that's signed Michael Scott from the Land Design Collaborative, representative of the applicant. And any questions on that?
Yeah, why is it?
They haven't. Well,
They just haven't responded?
So they've been working with the town engineer. As you recall, the town engineer sent a 3 or 4 page letter at the last meeting. They were not ready. They need to do some wetlands investigation. It has to do with the soil that they're bringing back.
all right. I will
Have a
make
motion prepared.
Okay. Is anybody ready to make that
I
motion?
move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the earth-moving special permit application for 25 Gleason Street to Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 at 6:30 as requested by the applicant.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0 in favor of continuance. We also have a continuation of the public hearing for the site plan application at 190-212 Oak Street. We have a letter from the applicant dated September 20th, 2022, addressed to Jim Robbins, town planner. We request a continuation of the public hearing scheduled for tonight, being September 20th, for Hana Place to the next scheduled planning board meeting. And that is signed for Farooq Ansari, owner. Any questions on that? Okay. Do we have a draft motion on that?
Yes.
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the site plan review application for 190-212 Oak Street to Tuesday, October 4, 2022 at 6:30 as requested by the applicant.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's 5-0 in favor of continuing that public hearing. I don't see Mr. Ansari for an update on Village Commons. Jim, do you have any update you want to share with the board?
So very briefly, as you know, at the last meeting, the board wanted to wait to allow me to sign an occupancy permit for units 10 and 19. Unit 10 is an affordable unit. Unit 19 is the unit that was sold to a gentleman, market rate unit. 16, thank you. Yes, she's right. Unit 16. It was an upside-down 9. Unit 16 was the unit that was sold to a gentleman who was unable to get into the unit because the affordable unit was not complete. And the reason that the affordable unit was not complete was because the landscape plan was still not installed, and several of the items on the facade had substitutions that were not appropriate according to the design review plans. I visited the site today, and the landscaping is fully installed. That was also confirmed by the landscape architect in writing, and we received that. So Unit 10 is complete per the design review requirements. Unit 16 is also complete per the design review requirements. However, we've had several storm events in the last couple of weeks, and drainage issues were documented by the Public Works inspector, and Mr. Ansari submitted additional photos also showing drainage issues, but that the issues subside within a couple hours after heavy rain. I had asked the town engineer to come. She was here, but because of the extenuated last public hearing, she has left, so I don't have testimony from her. I have informed Mr. Ansari by an email yesterday that he needs to address the drainage issues. I'm hoping that the board will require him to have the engineer, his engineer, not our town engineer, address this drainage issue to see what the real issue is there. That needs to be resolved before the last 2 final occupancies. He has some outstanding building inspection issues with the remaining units out there, so I'm not worried about him applying for an occupancy. But in the interim, we need to get these issues resolved because it'll be winter soon. And you don't want to have these drainage issues be outstanding, not just because there could be ice in the winter, but because any ice that's on the site because of bad drainage will cause the pavers to heave. And we've worked hard to get the landscaping correct. We've worked hard to get the summer house correct. And I don't want to see those pavers pop out in the spring.
Jim, I have a question. Did he get the CO on number 10 or not?
He will from us, but he doesn't because he has several building issues still outstanding.
Right, but wasn't he supposed to get that before he got the CO for 16?
Yes. And he doesn't have the CO from the building department on that one either.
According to Kristen, he does.
I can't hear you, Kristen, I'm sorry.
Shammy told her that they have the occupancy on 60.
I'll confirm that with Fred.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're going to need another update. They'll be on the next agenda. I don't necessarily know that without him here that we're going to accomplish
I
more.
mean, I would be concerned about that because our whole point was that we wanted to make sure that the affordable unit was finished.
And Fred's well aware of that. He's been enforcing that right along. So we'll ask Fred to give us an update, okay? Because if he didn't follow that, I'm confident he followed that. He's been on top of that right along.
As I said, it'd be interesting to hear what the story is. Okay.
I mean, that's the whole reason,
Yeah.
I mean, we've expressed 3 or 4 times in this meeting that I don't think we have to worry about that. All right, we also have a discussion of, all right, are we done with Village Commons? Any other questions on Village Commons? All right. We also have a discussion on the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We sent out acceptance letters last week. We also sent out letters to those applicants that weren't chosen, encouraging them to continue to participate in town government, and Kristen gave them a list of openings. We've asked the appointees to get sworn in. That process is still ongoing. Once they're sworn in, we'll call a meeting. Hopefully, I'd like to have a meeting before town meeting, but I'm not sure why that is important to me, and I don't think there's any necessary correlation between that. Just, I would like to get that process going.
And my understanding is that Mark, you and I, and VHB, the consultant, will meet with the department heads on October 5th.
Yeah, we do have a meeting with department heads on October 5th. So, any questions on that? Okay, then we have a discussion of future town meeting articles.
We have the library article, which you had the public hearing on and made a recommendation to the town manager. I'm going to speak with Christie about that tomorrow. I haven't had a chance since I got back from
Are
my
we
vacation.
motioning that, or?
No, that will be done by the library, and then the planning board will give a report.
Okay, and they'll do the presentation on that, too?
Yes, their engineer will do the presentation.
Okay. Town meeting is October 17th, Monday night?
Yeah, Monday, on our next scheduled meeting. After that is the 18th, so hopefully we'll be done in one night. I leave that to you, Patrick.
It looked like they're fairly short. I mean, I looked at the warrant article.
Yeah, it's gotten a little longer, but I think we'll be able to get through it in one night, because I really don't want to have to cancel that 18th meeting.
So the town meeting's on the 17th?
17th,
I
Monday
am
night.
not going to be able to make it.
Okay.
Is that a problem?
No.
Okay.
I'll just remember that in the spring.
I have another planning board meeting.
That's fine.
Since this is kind of a general topic, can I bring up an idea for a future town meeting article?
In the interest of time, can we discuss that offline?
It can be real quick.
All right, go ahead.
Can we just look into, or have like the zoning advisory committee, whatever is in Westborough, look into requiring solar for developments and electric vehicle charging stations in future developments?
We
so that
require
don't
EV
have-
now. We require the EV, but we don't have any solar
I
requirement.
think just having something to actually point to and say, you have to do this would be.
Do you have any model that we could,
I don't. I can come up with one because I'm thinking of one for Hopkinton as
It was
well.
my understanding the new building codes may address that, or?
I was thinking
Why
also
don't
for
we
parking.
get, maybe bring Sustainable Westborough in on that? I think that was an initiative in the master plan as well. So I do think it's something that we need to tackle, but it's not a quick,
No.
yeah, that could be one of the first goals that we talk about when we implement the master plan. And Patrick is, again, sitting here, and he's a member of Sustainable Westborough, so.
we're going to
talk
get
about it.
everything done all at once in the master. No, again, I think that should be a pretty important priority, but let's get the committee together to decide on those priorities, or at least which ones we're going to push. There were a lot of prioritized things in the master plan that we'll have to make some decisions on. Anything else? Minutes?
Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to look at them, so could we wait till the next
We
meeting?
can.
please?
All right. Any other business?
I had one other thing I wanted to just bring up very
Sure.
quickly, I've had some members of the public talk to me about the way our agenda is set up. The town board and most of the other meetings have particular times for items, and people find it frustrating that we're all at one time, because then it means they may have to sit through a great many things before they get to the item they're interested in. So I would just put this in the hopper at the moment, doesn't need to be discussed, but we may want to look at trying to formulate our agenda in a little different way.
Yeah, we had
That's all I
changed
wanted to
that maybe, 10 years ago to
That's
do it
what I
this way.
heard, yeah.
And,
People would like to see it go back.
I think the problem at the time was we were finishing our items early, and, particularly with public hearings, you can't start before the posted time. So the reason those are so it might be something where if it's not a public hearing, we could post a realistic time, or maybe we just go back to estimating how, I don't think anyone would have estimated 2.5 hours on this one tonight, but
What we usually do is we don't put times for the items, we just put the time for the meeting, and everything starts at that time, but then we do in parentheses like estimated 60 minutes,
Yeah,
estimated 90
that would be
minutes.
helpful,
Something.
yeah, just something to give people, particularly people that are watching, because people said, I wanted to watch something, but I didn't want to sit through, 2.5 hours of something that maybe it wasn't, that I wasn't looking forward to. So I'm just raising this.
all right. Any other business? I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? It's 5-0 in favor.